Her black hair billowed in the wind as she watched. He was telling the people to celebrate below. A festival was being held that day, October 10th, the date of his younger sister's birthday and, more importantly, the day he lost his father. Minato stood proudly atop the Hokage tower as he addressed the crowd, eliciting a snort from the raven-haired man. There had been a time when he had considered that man his father. But that time passed. After all, what sane father would seal a demon inside his own children? Without realizing it, Naruto's hand slowly moved toward the corner of his eye, tracing the seal that surrounded him. Naruto saw a redhead slowly approaching the Hokage, and he had to restrain himself from growling at her. No matter what he did, no matter how well he behaved, that vixen wouldn't let him meet his own little sister, the one who had to share the other half of his curse. He wished he had had his mother. He had seen pictures of her loving face and knew that if she had still been alive, everything would have been all right. They could have been a happy family, but, unfortunately, he was practically exiled and his little sister was considered the princess of Konoha. He slowly closed his eyes, hiding his golden complexion from the world before turning and heading home, fed up with the festivities for one night. His cloak billowed in the wind as he skipped across the rooftops, his feet barely making a sound as he touched the tiles he used to lift. His younger sister, Natsumi, would start the academy this year. Undoubtedly, her journey would be easier than his. The dark-haired teenager found it amusing. He was the bastard son of his senior Kage, while his sister, sadly related to her whore of a stepmother, was considered royalty. She came from two great clans, for God's sake. His black sandals made no sound as they landed softly on the grass. He glanced quickly around to make sure he wasn't being followed. It wouldn't matter much if he was, since the animals wouldn't let anyone but him and a few others near their home. But it was better to be safe than sorry. When the coast was clear, he adjusted his traveling cloak even more and stepped forward as the tigers came out to greet him, before slipping back into the shadows. He was considered the king of Training Camp 44. The animals knew it, even the shinobi. He rushed through appointments for those who wanted to enter, for he was known for killing anyone who entered the forest, hence its name, the Forest of Death. With a small flick of his wrist, he opened the front door and entered with difficulty, hearing it close behind him. With a flick of his arms, he removed his cloak and hung it on the hook by the door as he continued toward the kitchen in his shinobi attire. He wore black umbu pants and a tight black shirt that reached his wrists. He wasn't wearing a bulletproof vest because, to the villagers, he was just a monster unworthy of rank. He went to the kitchen and put the kettle on to boil, intending to make himself a cup of coffee to wake up and warm up. Winter was just around the corner. He could feel it. He didn't understand how people managed to mark the change of season, but he let it go, knowing it must have been someone smarter than him, or a madman. He took out his cup and filled it with 2 teaspoons of that flaky, golden brown stuff he called coffee, before sprinkling a thin layer of fairy dust, sugar, on top. The teapot gave a resonant click, signaling that he was finished. With a flick of his wrist, a thread of chakra wound off his finger, hooking deftly around the teapot and pulling it down to where he stood with his cup, filling it with steaming water. A few drops spilled onto his bench. The way he handled it was lazy, and he could have done it properly without making a mess, but this also helped his chakra control. He needed very fine control for that jutsu, and even doing that little trick helped him learn to handle it better. The sun was setting outside as she grabbed a washcloth from the sink and quickly mopped up the mess she'd made. It bathed her house in a natural orange light that made her feel more alive. She hated that feeling. It was painted deep blue for a reason, to maintain a cool demeanor, as she'd been taught. It was to remind her that there was no room for weakness in her life, however tempting it might become, and finally, it was to keep people away. She didn't like unwelcome visitors. If they were going to bother her, they'd better have a good reason. He finished his coffee quickly, leaving a bitter taste in his mouth as he wandered through the house and headed toward the dojo, noticing the change in flooring. It was now tatami. The soft sensation beneath his feet made him kneel carefully and bow slightly, resting his forehead on the floor. As he stood up, still kneeling, he closed his eyes and felt his power slowly envelop him. The reason he was banished. The material he already knew used his chakra as a kind of barrier to redirect incoming damage. For example, if a kunai struck his side, Instead of cutting him as it normally would, it transformed into a blunt force that spread across the side of the impact to reduce the damage received. She let it wrap around her ponytail and finish covering her body before slowly standing up. Her armor, her curse, and her blessing. It was sleek and silent, neither hindering her nor too conspicuous. It could blend into the resonating zones in an instant, making it invisible to the naked eye. She felt a weight on her back and knew her bow was back in place. He had dedicated so much time to this obsidian beauty that it was riddled with seals whose complexity would make even Jiraiya shudder. It was completely silent. He swiftly applied a seal to the arrow as he made the notch, masking any sound it might make and any sound from its impact. It was her perfect long-range weapon, capable of killing in the stillness of the night without revealing her position. Below her was her katana, resting gently against her spine. Its scabbard was a very dark gray, while the blade itself was a heavily tinted purple, making it much darker than normal so it wouldn't stand out too much. Bundles of kunai rested on her thighs, refilling when the suit drained her chakra to forge the metal, allowing her to use them as if they were old-fashioned if she needed to. She drew her sword from its scabbard and felt the tiny spark of lightning coursing through her because of her lineage. This suit hugged his body and made him feel stronger than ever as he passed himself off as human. A light knock on his door demonstrated how impressive his hearing was, as he could hear it from over 50 meters away through closed doors and walls. He let the suit detach from his body, turning to ash on the floor, and gazed at it fondly for a moment before heading to the front door. Opening it, he saw a group of ANBU. He stared at them and nodded, letting them know he wanted to talk. "Kurama-san, your friend, is at it again. This time it's Tashiko." He hated Minato sometimes. Not only had he taken his name, but he'd also forced him to let this ANBU group onto his property for reasons like these. "I'll be gone in a moment. Leave before I force you to." He snorted, slamming the door in their faces. He draped his cloak over his shoulders and fastened the front clasp, sighing at the click. He let his body vanish into smoke as the air carried him where he needed to go. Anko's night out had started to go downhill. It all began as usual. She and Kurenai went out for drinks. Unfortunately, two drunken 16-year-olds were too much for the perverted Konoha girl to just sit back and watch the men become increasingly vulnerable. This led to her current predicament, her back to Kurenai, surrounded on all sides by lustful Chunin and Jounin. Things weren't looking good for either of them. "I still find it interesting how often you get into trouble, Anko-san." Her eyes widened at the sound of his calm voice being cut off by the din of the drunks. Some even dared to turn around and saw the golden-eyed man looking rather bored with the situation. "You're all too noisy for my taste. Please leave now. I'm sure no one wants to deal with you. And remember to pay Tashiko for any damage you've caused to his bar, or I'll come looking for you." He tilted his head when he saw that no one was moving. She rubbed some dirt from her eyes and threw it to the ground in disgust. "If you're so eager to fight me, please find me in the street. Don't look at me like a mere fan. It's beneath a shinobi." Kurenai peered between Anko and the stranger. "Who is that?" she whispered, hoping only her purple-haired friend could hear her. Unfortunately, she was unaware of Naruto's sharp hearing. "I'm her caretaker, so to speak. They call me when she gets into trouble so things don't escalate." Kurenai glanced back at her friend and saw her nod shyly, scratching the back of her neck. A light blush appeared on her cheeks, indicating that the sake they'd been drinking had taken effect on her still-developing body. A few grunts were heard from the men, who reprimanded him for what he'd said and left to mock him. A flash crossed his eyes, making Anko flinch. Even though she was only 2 years younger than him, it seemed like there were light years of difference in skill. And that glint in his eyes had always foreshadowed pain ever since he became her coach. He gestured for the two girls to follow him, and Anko quickly took Kurenai's hand, not wanting to upset him with his current state. "Not again. Trust me, it's better to listen to him now. Just listen and observe." Kurenai nodded, uncomprehending, as she watched the group crowd around the raven-haired man with the serpentine eyes. He focused on the crowd and lowered his stance to almost a crouch. An arrogant Chunin entered and tried to sweep his bag leg, but Naruto ended the attempt by placing his foot in the man's face and kicking him to the ground beneath them. The man writhed for a few seconds before collapsing. Seeing that no one else was as eager to make things happen, he shifted into a more relaxed stance, as if ready to engage someone. His right hand was slightly forward at throat level, while his left rested on his sternum, both in a position to defend or attack if necessary. His feet were relaxed and felt light, meaning he could move at any moment. Please don't waste my time. A small group of Jounin rushed at him. He hoped the amount of alcohol they'd consumed that night had slowed them down. Otherwise, he seriously feared for the safety of Konoha. One was quickly taken out with a powerful punch to the face, knocking him to the ground. Naruto spun around, grabbing the other's arm, twisting sharply before the bone was freed from its prison of skin. He delivered a side punch to the one who seemed a little too interested in his arm for his own good. He saw the last man approaching and sighed, giving him a light kick to the stomach that doubled him over before wrapping his leg around his neck and launching them both into the air to gain momentum and throw them at the end of the movement, kicking up a bit of dirt as the last man slid across the ground. Why, you're a mon? No, you're a demon through and through. I don't understand why they let you into this village. The speaker had shaken off his fear mid-speech. Or perhaps he was remembering that he was a shinobi and shouldn't reveal something so obvious to his opponent. Naruto tilted his head and blinked at the man. What you're saying is I'm here to do what needs to be done. Idiots, you're disturbing the peace. Go away. He waved his hand, hoping the group would leave. He turned to face Anko when a bottle was smashed against the back of his head. He felt a trickle of blood spurt from the wound and run down his back. I'll give you up to 10 seconds to leave before I kill you for being such a naive fool. Naruto didn't even need to start counting, because the man, before smirking arrogantly, looked like he was about to get dirty as he ran. They call me a demon and then expect me to collapse after being hit with a bottle. What idiots. He reflected more to himself than to the remaining girls. Kurenai's jaw threatened to dislocate as Anko raised her fist in the air. Kurama 32 to the villager 0. It seems you still have the advantage, Kurama-san. She tried to say politely at the end, knowing he might be in a bad mood. He turned to her and gave her a slight smile. Anko-san, aren't you supposed to tell me when you're planning to go out tonight? So you're saying it on the council's and the Hokage's orders. Naruto mused. He noticed Kurenai scrutinizing his appearance and found it odd. He almost enjoyed the sight of her red eyes dancing over his body. Almost. Did I forget? Naruto gave a small tisk and shook his head, showing his disapproval. I know it's still early, but I think it's time to go out. Don't you think, Anko-san? He gestured to Kurenai to call her over. The young woman jumped when he pointed at her. She pointed to herself as well, which made him nod. Yes, you. What's your name, Anko-san's friend? Kurenai. She stammered under his golden gaze. He turned the thought over in his mind for a few moments. Crimson, like his eyes, fit in a strange way. I suppose the polite thing to do would be to walk them home. Anko nodded cheerfully. She seemed to have calmed down, which was always a good thing, as she could be quite violent when she was. The group arrived quickly at Kurenai's apartment after she said her goodbyes. She stared at Naruto for a few seconds longer than expected, which made him tilt his head in confusion. He felt a light nudge in his ribcage and saw Anko give him a little nudge. She's crazy about you guys, Kurama-s. No, I'll just call you Kurama. Naruto watched her for a few more seconds before chuckling to himself. Then I'll call you Gaki. Now, come on, Gaki, let's go home. He teased, stopping only when he saw her dejected expression. What happened, Anko? He abandoned all formality, mainly because he knew she didn't like it much, nor did he, but it showed that he was still human and not a rampaging monster. I got kicked out of my apartment today. I was going to try and seduce a guy into taking me home and letting me stay the night so I could sort things out in the morning. Naruto snorted inwardly at the idea. It was stupid. You can sleep on my couch tonight. I can help you find a new place tomorrow. But, for future reference, trying to seduce a guy usually means you want to sleep with him, not at his place. She blushed deeply at the thought, as she hadn't planned this far in advance, and only realized that he'd told her she could stay the night. Seriously, Kurama? You do that? He shrugged slightly. It makes my job easier, since I know where you are. He gave her a small smile as she apologized. Later that night, he was summoned to the Hokage's office. The black-haired teenager, who looked remarkably like Madara in his glory days, gazed at the man who would have been his father, that is, if things had turned out as they were. The first thing she noticed was that there were no Yin Bu in the room. Her black hair, now without its ponytail, fell down her back, framing her face and making her golden, animalistic eyes even more piercing. "Did you call Hokage-sama?" Her voice was cold, revealing her displeasure at being there. She had obeyed, as always, and had shown it, though she felt a certain inexplicable hatred toward the man. Minato stood up from behind his desk and handed a file to Naruto. The black-haired teenager read it quickly, raising his eyebrows at the end. "It's a 4-year project, one I can't entrust to anyone else." Naruto snorted and calmly placed the file on the Kage's desk. "Aren't you worried I'll betray you? I'm just your demon bastard who loves nothing. People aren't sure if I'll attack them or not for following the same path." Minato grimaced at how calm and collected he sounded about it. He had listened to Kushina, and that was why he had created a monster. "You are loyal to the village, not to its villagers. That's why I can entrust you with this position. You cannot be bribed, since you don't need money. You are tougher than Ibiki and more fearsome on the battlefield than the man you resemble." Naruto smiled inwardly at his father's praise, while outwardly he remained calm, his face impassive. "You don't need to tell me what I'm good at. After all, I trained to be it. I accept on 2 conditions. He began, and Minato gestured for him to explain. "I won't be a pawn for the council to play with. I will only obey your orders in person." Minato understood the logic. Naruto's chakra was too violent for a normal Jinjutsu to counter. The Ilio-sun would simply vanish like sand. "Second, when I become a Jonin, the council know it will force me to form a team. I'll do it if I want to." Minato nodded. The conditions were reasonable enough. "Looks like we have a deal, Oni." Minato extended his hand to shake Naruto's as he watched the suit that would become feared spread over the boy's body and cover every inch of his true identity. His distorted, demonic voice came through Oni's strange, fox-like helmet. "My sword serves Konoha." He gave a small bow and vanished into the night sky, taking off for home. Tomorrow he would prepare for his new job. Kurenai sat on the bed in her small apartment, deep in thought, her legs drawn up to her chest. She wasn't quite ready for bed yet, so she used this method to keep warm, as turning on the heat seemed like too much effort at the moment. She had been promoted to Chunin earlier in the week. Tonight was supposed to be her night of celebration, but she understood the logic behind Kurama's words. She faintly wondered why Anko had never mentioned him to her. Was she hiding something? She let out a small sigh and sank down onto the bed, determined to try and get some sleep. Her voice was enchanting and imbued with that aura she found so appealing. "Oh," she exclaimed, turning over and burying her face in the pillow. She was too old to be in love with a schoolgirl. She frowned at the thought. He seemed like someone he should know, someone important. He remembered their fight. He was a bit arrogant, but he had a very good reason for it, seeing how quickly he dispatched the Jounin. It made him wonder what his chances were against him, even though he liked the idea that they were slim or non-existent. It made her wonder why someone like that had been tasked with looking after Anko. That was her last thought as she slowly drifted off to sleep. He woke up early, quickly finishing his routine before heading out to the local cafe and dango shop, knowing it was where he met Anko every morning. He saw the black-haired teenager walking beside him again and frowned inwardly, thinking that perhaps Anko had claimed him the night before. He became even more convinced when Anko parted from him and thanked him for letting her stay the night. As she turned away from Naruto, she saw the expression on Kurenai's face and let out a childish giggle. "We didn't do anything, Kurenai. Good grief. What do you take me for?" The raven-haired girl remained expressionless, but decided not to bother replying. "Anyway, I didn't care anyway." She crossed her arms over her chest and snorted softly. "Yes, you do," Anko said as she entered the store to order her breakfast. Naruto arrived at his new office already dressed in his suit. Well, the best way to describe it is to imagine Madara's perfect Susanoo worn as a form-fitting suit of armor. A very deep blue-black main color with a slight crimson tint at the edge. I hope that helps. He walked calmly to his office and saw a note on the desk asking him to report to the council chamber at 9 o'clock. Looking at the clock on his desk, He saw he only had 15 minutes and decided to walk since he didn't exactly have enough time to do anything else. He could hear the noisy debate happening inside and figured they wouldn't hear him even if he knocked, so he used his preferred method of travel, turning into smoke. He slipped into the room through the keyhole and reformed, standing directly behind the Hokage, startling many of the room's occupants when they finally realized what was happening. A burly civilian stood up indignantly, thinking that someone would barge into the council chambers as if the rules didn't apply to them. Who do you think you are? Coming in here and covering your face. I demand you tell us your name. Naruto tilted his head before looking at Minato. He didn't bother answering the loud man. He'd already told him he wouldn't be given orders. Minato clapped his hands to draw everyone's attention to himself and Naruto. The person standing behind me is the solution to the corruption I've seen in this council. This is our new Yanbiyu commander, Oni. Naruto gave a small bow, glad his face was hidden or the Uzumaki clan leader would glare at him. He only obeys my orders, so his loyalty isn't to the council, only to the Hokage. Some civilians gasped at his words, while the ninja nodded, fed up with these greedy freeloaders who bribed their way to the top. Naruto stepped forward and stood beside Minato, surveying everyone present. If I deem your actions a threat to this village, I will kill you. This is your warning. He looked at Minato, who nodded, indicating two things: that he agreed with his handling of the situation and that he could leave for now. Naruto once again turned into a wisp of smoke and disappeared through the ventilation grates as if he had never been there. Oni stood in the middle of the Hokage's office, still covered by the suit to conceal his identity. Take off your mask. But not for long, for he reached out and removed the mask, the suit that enveloped him vanishing, leaving him in crimson armor. His disheveled black locks cascaded down his back, reaching his upper legs. His unruly hair fell past his chin, covering the left side of his face, while the right was framed by the strands. Madara's hair, except it was reflected. His visible eye was a vibrant red with 3 tomo. The ANBU in the room gasped and drew their swords tremulously. Madara. They rushed forward in an attempt to protect their Hokage. Naruto easily blocked every blow the Umbu threw at him, not even drawing his own sword. Retreat, Umbu, roared the blonde Kage from the other side of the desk. Their hands remained clasped together throughout the entire exchange, while Naruto stared straight ahead with an apathetic expression. You really do resemble your grandfather. I can see where you inherited that look from. That hurt. Hurt so much that he had to find out that night instead of from his own father. He'd forced himself to get a little closer to Minato. When you're the leader of his private army and only take orders from him face to face, it's pretty hard not to. A medallion hung loosely around Naruto's neck. The UI was engraved on the silver jewel. People will ask questions. Minato grimaced at the sound of his son's hardened voice. He couldn't blame him, though the missions Naruto had completed were inhuman and would truly test his sanity. You can deactivate your Sharingan now, Naruto. Naruto nodded slightly, and his eyes regained their usual gold, but now they bore a black pattern of smoking shurikens in the irises. Minato had read his son's report. His eyes had changed upon unlocking his Sharingan, mutating even their natural appearance. Seeing with my natural eyes feels strange now. He cracked his neck to the side and let out a small grunt. Now that my 4 years are up, I suppose I'll be demoted to Jounin, Naruto said. It was what they had agreed upon, so why would it have changed? Not exactly. You've been granted Sannin travel permits. This means you can travel to any nation where we're neutral by simply showing your ninja ID. Honestly, I think you could do it without that permit, especially since you look like a Madara clone. Naruto snorted at his father's comment. I'll be making an announcement in a few moments throughout the village. Umbu, please. Everyone bowed and left the room. Will we return to our estranged relationship, father? His eyes showed no emotion as he continued to stare out the windows behind the blonde Kage. Kushina will be angry. Naruto felt like slapping the man in front of him. After all this time, he was still so dejected. But she'll have to learn to deal with it. In the last 4 years, we reconnected. You reminded me what it was like to have a son. Thank you, Naruto. He gave his father a small smile. He'll try to take action against me using the council. We both know it. Minato smiled broadly in his seat. He won't. I'll stand firm when the meeting is called shortly after the announcement. Minato gestured for Naruto to follow as they made their way up the tower, hugging the walls. I don't know which path you're straying from, yours or mine, the blonde joked, eliciting a sort of smile from Naruto as they reached the sunlit rooftop. Naruto looked back to where he had been 4 years ago and saw a new Yanbiyu member in the same position. He saw the figure flinch at Naruto's appearance and reach for his sword, which he carried on his back. All this happened as Minato's hand slowly descended to rest on his son's shoulder, calming the Yanbiyu. People of Konoha. The crowd looked up, and the duo on the rooftop heard shouts. I need you to calm down. Minato tried to soothe the crowd, but his efforts were in vain. Listen to your Kage maggots. The Yanbiyu who hadn't been in the room now knew who was standing next to the Hokage, his former commander. Naruto's voice froze those on the ground. Well, that was quite effective. This man beside me isn't Uchiha Madara. He's his grandson and my son, Uchiha Naruto. Minato had offered him the Namake's name, but Naruto politely declined, saying it would cause more trouble than it deserved. He's with me today, so don't give him the same reaction he got when you first noticed him everywhere he went in the village. That's all. Minato stood up and stepped back from the edge, taking only a few steps before bursting into laughter. The looks on their faces, priceless. Naruto frowned. He knew where he'd gotten that personality from, too. I think I'll say goodbye, father. Minato nodded, clutching his sides in pain. Naruto shook his head. Sometimes he couldn't believe he was that man's son. He vanished in silent black flames that appeared outside his house. It had been so long since his last visit. He hoped Anko had taken care of it. A large tiger emerged from the bush to his right, coming within striking distance, before allowing Naruto to walk on undisturbed. It's strange how animals are sometimes smarter than humans. He figured Anko was either awake or asleep, so he entered the house, making his way down the hallway to the living room, where he was greeted by the sight of a topless Anko pacing back and forth. He could hear male sighs, which only made the situation worse. Seriously, Anko, on my couch? The purple one slowly turned her head upon hearing those words and saw a face she hadn't seen in a long time. Wow, for years really does change a person. She turned away from the man. Cammy, he was so happy to see her in buttoned jeans. It wasn't as bad as he thought. What did I tell you about casual intimacy? Naruto growled as he approached the sofa. Anko jumped in front of him and waved her hands defensively. If you came over to my house once in a while, you'd know we've been dating for a few months. Where have you been? Naruto just shook his head, unsure if he could believe him, but this time he would. Now that the job's done, I can legally tell you that I was the Yanbiyu commander. Anko looked like a fish out of water as she finished the sentence. Naruto glanced over the back of the sofa and saw a frightened Chunin, trembling. Looking up, he saw crimson eyes and what he thought was a dead man, and he fainted. Actually, it was pretty fun. He looked at Anko for a moment. So, you and Irika, huh? She nodded hesitantly, answering his question. Good for you both. I hope everything goes well. She nodded again, but her gaze gradually hardened. Sir, we're going out for a drink tonight. Naruto raised an eyebrow in question at the little girl giving him orders. It was strange to receive them from someone other than his father. He nodded slowly, and Anko pointed to the medallion around his neck. Who is Yua? Flashback. Oni was crouched atop a sloping rooftop, Weasel and the umbu he had taken under his wing, sort of, beside him. Are you sure you're ready for this? He heard Weasel take a deep breath before nodding. You managed to get in, I'll deal with you. He saw Weasel jerk his head up, about to protest. I'll let Sasuke live. I'm not ruthless despite the rumors. Itachi nodded shakily and removed his mask. They're our clan. They deserve to see the faces of those who killed them, so they know who to curse in the afterlife. Naruto nodded and removed his mask with his chakra, revealing his crimson eye to the world. See you soon. Good luck, Onisama. Itachi vanished among a flock of crows as Naruto stealthily made his way to the center of the compound, barely moments after his departure. He entered through the window of Itachi's room, which had been left open before he left that night. This house posed the greatest risk, as it contained an alert button for anyone ready to rebel. He went to the master bedroom and entered silently. He remained perfectly still, sitting at the head of the bed, above Fugaku, the katana held in reverse grip a millimeter from the man's forehead. One slip and he would wake him. He was tired and bored of thinking about the many ways to kill this traitor. With a single swift movement, he raised the blade a few centimeters before plunging it directly into Fugaku's skull. He pushed too hard and heard the fabric of the pillow tear beneath his head. This caused the woman beside him to stir. She awoke slowly and was on the verge of panic when she saw a sword protruding from her husband's head. Looking up, she saw him crouching with a finger to his lips. She felt a kunai tapping against her throat and swallowed. "I knew your mother," she whispered, frowning. He removed his finger from his lips and tapped the kunai again, signaling her to continue. "Uchiha Izanami, the daughter of Uchiha Madara. Your grandfather. Didn't you ever wonder where you got such a beauty?" The woman smiled at him warmly and kindly. It deeply confused her that he was there to kill her, but she wasn't afraid. She was as beautiful as her name suggested and as kind as anyone. Besides, she was your father's first choice. That has to count for something, doesn't it? She was proud of it. Kushina could only sink her claws into Minato because his mother had passed away. "I know why you're here tonight. I know what I must do. There's a note in my drawer that was meant for Itachi. I saw you a few years ago and suspected you might be his son. It seems I was right." She was making it very difficult for him with her cheerfulness, telling him everything he wanted to know. "I just want you to know that we deserve what you and Itachi are doing. We've hurt you almost as much as we've hurt the village." Naruto narrowed his eyes as Mikoto continued speaking. "The clan elders poisoned your mother so she wouldn't survive childbirth. It was her punishment for getting pregnant by a non-Uchiha out of wedlock. She would die if she continued the pregnancy." A drop of fluid fell onto Mikoto's cheek. She looked up into Naruto's tearful eyes. "Your mother said she couldn't kill you even if her life depended on it. I saw her hold you for the first time, tears streaming down her face as her heart sank. You begged for a few more seconds as you wrapped your tiny hands around your finger." Naruto wasn't the only one with tears on his face anymore, as some were beginning to trickle down the face of the Uchiha below. Minato had to leave the room because he couldn't bear to watch her die. "He took all the blame and tried to make you happy, but it didn't last. Well, you know how the rest of the story goes, Naruto." He nodded. "I'm sorry, and thank you, Mikoto." He lowered his head and watched as the kunai approached his skin. He saw the panic in her eyes. Itachi already asked for it. Sasuke must live. He nodded and slowly closed his eyes, awaiting his death. He made it as quick and painless as possible. He shared a bed with a monster. For him, he had already suffered enough in his life. He wiped his kunai and removed his sword from Fugaku's head, shaking the blood off the ground as he moved towards the places Mikoto had mentioned, finding a note just as she had said. "Itachi, I understand what you have to do, and I know it must be difficult. But please, could you grant me 2 final requests? Take care of Sasuke, but don't spoil him, okay? He doesn't want to be treated like a baby anymore. He wants to be more like you, strong and brave. Please find the man named Kurama/Naruto, give him this key, and tell him about my safe deposit box at the First Bank of Konoha. I thank you for cleaning up the mess your father made, my son. I don't regret having you for a single moment, considering what's to come, since this is as much my fault as anyone else's. Your beloved mother, Mikoto." Naruto noticed the key and picked it up, carefully folding the note and putting them inside his suit for safekeeping. He steeled himself, hoping there wasn't another house like this one. Itachi left the village that night. He held too many memories to keep. Naruto understood what he meant and let him go before reporting him missing, holding the box he'd been left with. Opening it, he found a handful of sealed scrolls and some ninjutsu scrolls. But among them all, a silver medallion lying in the center stood out and seemed to call to him. He carefully picked it up and opened it, seeing a picture of his parents, side by side, happy, their hands resting on a small bump on Izanami's stomach. A single tear fell, finally having a family photo. He unfastened the clasp and placed it around his neck, carefully closing it as he wrapped the contents of the box in a sealed scroll and put it away. "Thanks again, Mikoto." End of flashback. Anko saw the small tear that trickled down his face and wondered if he had said something wrong. He gently cleared his throat and opened the locket, showing it to Anko, who gasped, "Uchiha Izanami, my mother." Anko looked at him and, for the first time in her life, could sincerely say that she was happy. She reached out to hug him, but a hand stopped her. First, put some clothes on. Anko let out a small eep when she realized her upper body was still bare. With her bra and tight t-shirt covering her, she stepped forward and hugged Naruto. Not so good now that the moment's over, she murmured against his chest, making him laugh. At least now we're both fully dressed. She nodded, and he smiled. It was strange without you, you know. I'm so glad you're back. She gave him a radiant smile. Yes, they hadn't spoken much before he disappeared, but thinking about it, every time things were about to get bad in her life, he would appear and make them better, even if just for a little while. It's good to be back, Gaki. He smiled smugly as he rested his chin on her head and felt her playfully punch his chest. Want to wake your boyfriend up and have a drink? I could use a few bottles. He laughed shyly, and she leaned back, laughing at his embarrassed expression. Naruto, frankly, wasn't surprised that he'd been dragged there. You weren't kidding, the crowd parts when you move, Anko said in amazement, clinging to Irika's arm. She said the Chunin felt incredibly out of place where he was. It didn't take long for him to arrive at the bar. Eyes watched him with special caution as he sat down wearing a pair of jeans and a nice long-sleeved t-shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, the silver locket in place around his neck. Anko, I got your message. Naruto recognized that voice, so he turned to greet them. Unfortunately, he was so used to having his Sharingan activated that he'd completely forgotten to use it to scare Irika. The figure leaped forward, pulled Anko and Irika away from him, and held them behind her. How are you alive, Madara? Naruto tilted his head. He'd thought she was the smart one. Hey, Madara, turn off your Sharingan. Anko made sure to put air quotes around her grandfather's name. Naruto did the same, and his golden eyes glowed again. He watched as Kurenai's jaw slowly lowered until it reached the point where it couldn't go any lower. Ka. She stuttered, causing him to smile at her. Call me Naruto. Uchiha Naruto. He gave a small bow that stirred his hair enough to reveal the outline of the seal around his left eye. He raised his head and saw Kurenai nod, surprised. And how about the first rounds on me? Naruto was bombarded with questions about what he'd been doing. He answered as best he could. Anko told me you were the Yanbu commander. Is that true? Naruto nodded and rolled up his left sleeve, revealing the Yanbu tattoo with a shuriken behind it, all perfectly integrated. Irika whistled at him. Well, now I have something to say to my students. You don't see that every day, do you? Naruto simply shrugged. It's not every day you retire and can talk about it. ANBU rules were clear. No talking about ANBU until you left ANBU. A light blush graced Kurenai's face. The fact that her little crush on him from 4 years ago had never faded didn't help matters, especially since he was incredibly handsome. She could see the definition in his biceps. Not to mention when Anko lifted his shirt and told Irika to get in shape like Naruto. It really didn't help at all. Well, maybe it did make her feel a little better. Anko's still pretty intense, isn't she? Her voice sounded so calm and full of life, unlike what he'd expect from a former ANBU. He glanced around and met her golden and crimson gaze. Her hair shifted slightly as she sat beside him, allowing him to see the complete seal around her left eye. It looked like tribal markings around it. He thought it was just another tattoo. Why are you hiding the tattoo you have around your eye? He shuddered a little when she asked. Because it's not a tattoo. Her voice hardened at that small question. Kurenai lowered her gaze slightly. It must be a delicate matter. I'm sorry. She jerked her head up. She was about to say those words when he spoke first. You didn't know? I shouldn't have acted like that. A smile played at the corner of his lips. Kurenai swayed slightly in her seat. The alcohol had finally taken effect. She leaned toward Naruto, drunk, and the raven-haired man turned as he felt her hot breath on his neck. Hey Naruto, the Hokage-sama wants to see you. Kurenai spun her head so fast that her hair almost hit Naruto in the face. Thank you, Asuma-san, I'll take my leave. He said goodbye to the group and handed Anko a wad of bills. I don't know if I'll be back tonight. So have fun, goodbye. He gave her a small smile, and her eyes widened at the amount he'd given her. She nodded enthusiastically. She glanced at Kurenai and said a quick, I'm sorry, as Naruto headed out the door. What do you want, Asuma? Asked the crimson-eyed woman, clearly showing her displeasure with what he had caused. Couldn't he really have waited even 5 minutes? I just wanted to tell you that I was stupid and that I want you back. Karina bit her lower lip and shook her head from side to side, trying to stifle a laugh. You're joking, right? Seeing that nothing changed, she continued. You try to impose your will on me the first time, and then you come back when I'm about to do something that, do you fancy it? He continued to shake his head. Asuma-san, I think you should leave. The voice came from behind the bar, and a very angry bartender was staring the bearded Jounin in the eyes. Yes, I understand. She already has you under her control. He made a gesture of indifference as he walked away, only for Anko to knock him to the ground with a swipe of her hand. Take that away, pig. Naruto stood before his father's desk, wearing the same clothes he'd worn at the bar. Minato smiled at the sight of the medallion still hanging from his son's neck. I'll be brief. I was wondering if you'd like to be a judge for the Jounin exams. They're in 4 months. Naruto shrugged slightly. I don't see any problem. Would you like me to give you some ANBU recommendations as well? Minato touched the tip of his nose and pointed at his son. I know you would understand. Naruto smiled at his father. Hokage-sama, a fight has broken out at Tashiko's house. Naruto sighed, and Minato turned to look at him. I was there. The blonde nodded, understanding. I'll take care of it, father. There's no need to send any ANBU. I'll hurry. Minato nodded, and Naruto was engulfed in black flames that appeared in front of Tashiko just in time, judging by the circumstances, as he caught 2 fists about to strike the person on either side of him. He turned his head to either side and saw Anko and Asuma. His crimson eyes, seeing the frightened look in their eyes, could read people and know who was responsible. It was even easier when the man didn't meet his gaze. If the Hokage hadn't been looking for me, he might have suspected you sent me there to cause trouble, Asuma-san. He tried to blurt out that Anko had started it. Anyway, Asuma-san, our evening was lovely until you showed up. Will you leave quietly, or should I take you to the ANBU cells? The bearded Jounin snorted. Of course you'd have the ANBU under your control. Naruto shook his head, feeling sorry for the man. Yes, they'll listen to me. But no, I don't control them. It's out of respect. Asuma broke free from Naruto's grip and prepared to throw another punch. The raven-haired Uchiha carefully moved Anko aside while blocking Asuma's attack. Attacking me while I was trying to calm things down. You have no honor, Asuma? Receiving no response from the man, he took a step back and placed his left hand on his hip, deactivating his Sharingan. I'd gladly fight you if that's what you want, so someone can crush your ego. The smoking Jounin raised his fists to his chest, adopting a slightly more relaxed boxing stance. You're going to need those eyes to keep up. I used to be a guardian, you know? Asuma said as he lunged forward. Naruto's hand sliced through the man's guard and crushed his windpipe just short of death before he delivered a swift punch to the side of his skull, sending him flying sideways, staggering and gasping for air before crashing to the ground. And I was the ANBU commander. I don't understand you. Asuma's eyes widened just before he fainted. That's a lesson for all of you. Don't be overconfident in your abilities. It will lead to your downfall. He turned and walked over to Anko, who was cheering him on. Iriko was shaking his head at his girlfriend's antics, and Kurenai was looking at Naruto with a puzzled expression. And what did your father want? Kurenai asked, pacing back and forth between Anko and Naruto. Didn't you know? Kurenai replied, shaking her head. Father asked me if I would be a judge for the upcoming Jounin exams. He saw Anko and Kurenai tense up. Well, it seems this will be more interesting than I thought. He felt delicate arms around his chest and looked down to see Kurenai leaning against him. Thanks. I know I should have defended myself, but he outranks and outclasses me. I guess I just didn't have the guts. Naruto placed a hand on his head. It's okay. I looked like a fool. But everything's fine now, right? He asked jokingly. She nodded, and he gazed at the stars in the sky. Kurenai thought this was as good an opportunity as any and started to lean in to kiss him, but this time she stopped. She was nervous and had become a little more sober. Hey, Kurenai, she nodded weakly against his chest, embarrassed that she couldn't do what she wanted. Why yes, I'm just tired. What a stupid lie. Oh, how about I walk you home then? He quickly agreed to the suggestion and left the bar with him, leaving Asuma on the ground, only to be picked up by a shadow moments later. It's very heavy, Naruto-sama. The figure groaned to itself before hopping off to the infirmary. We definitely need to get them both together. A purple woman clapped, while the man next to her nodded. Fail! Naruto shouted, sitting in the middle of a clearing in the forest of death. He heard a grumbling murmur from the one behind him as a clone pressed a kunai to his throat. How am I supposed to do this? She felt like laughing, but thought it might be a little insulting. Would you believe me if I told you about the walking on water exercise? There was no sound from the person behind him, which made him smile wryly. Ready to try again, Anko? She heard his footsteps growing softer before they vanished completely. With her eyes still closed, she strained her senses, trying to hear his footsteps. Still with her eyes closed, he jerked his right arm up, his fingers gripping her wrist. There's too much emotion behind your jerk. I know this exam means a lot to you, Anko, but believe me, you need to be able to detach yourself from emotions on high-level missions. He slowly opened his eyes and gave her a soft smile that made her blush. Stop doing that nonsense. That's exactly what I was talking about, kid. He chimed in, waving a finger of his free hand as if scolding a child. Your infiltration skills are almost Jounin level. The rest are still at upper Chunin level. She frowned as he spoke. But we still have more than 3 months to perfect them. I'll help you prepare for the exam. Her eyes lit up as his darkened. She'll hate me when this is all over, she thought to herself. He wasn't wrong. 2 weeks had passed in the blink of an eye for the couple. Anko lay panting on the floor, while Naruto looked like he'd just stepped out of the house to start the day. You're improving so much, Anko. When was the last time someone gave you some instruction? His question seemed innocent, at least to him. Would it have been before I left with Orochimaru? She gasped, and Naruto nodded. To rise from Genin to this level of skill, without any help, is impressive considering the time allotted. I think if someone had taken the time to train you when you were younger, you might have been considered a prodigy. Anko looked up and met his golden, smiling eyes. She was one of the few people who could imagine Madara smiling. I think we're done for today. Anko tried to get up, but she was pushed to the ground and a hand hovered over her chest. She was about to scream, pervert, when she saw the green glow around his hand. When did you learn to heal? Naruto looked at her for such a silly question. I was in ANBU for almost 14 years. 4 of them as a commander. All ANBU have basic medical training. It was the first time she'd heard how long he'd actually been in ANBU. There was no point in telling her he was the leader, since she'd never known he'd been in ANBU. Everything started to click, and she looked at him in shock. Oni, she asked weakly, to which he nodded. Oni had been the only male Anbu who had taken care of her when she was younger. Wow, how many years have you been taking care of me? Naruto thought, turning the idea over in his mind. About 10, I'd say. That kind of makes you like a brother, doesn't it? Naruto didn't see the logic, but he shrugged anyway. From now on you'll be Oni-chan. His face went blank. That was foolish, kid. Are you still trying? Anko snorted from where she was sitting as he finished tending to her minor injuries. You should be able to resume training in half an hour if that's what you want. She nodded and thanked him before leaving Naruto sitting in the clearing. A large white tiger approached and sat down in front of him, causing him to raise an eyebrow. What are you doing, buddy? The big cat yawned deeply and tilted its head to the side, looking at the black-haired man. Well, I'm a little hungry. Want to come and get something to eat? The big cat stood up and approached Naruto, its back towering over the man's hips. Naruto wasn't a small man either. He was about 6 feet 2 inches tall. He was just a big cat. Anko and Kurenai were panting, facing each other. The crimson-eyed Jinjutsu user was impressed by how much Anko had improved. Are you finally putting in the effort during your training? She asked, making the purple-haired girl frown. I've always done it, but I finally have someone to teach me. Kurenai wasted no time asking who. Naruto, of course. From the way she said it, it seemed like Kurenai had asked a stupid question. Does she know Jinjutsu? He asked. Anko thought about it for a moment before shrugging, not remembering ever having used it. Yes, I do. A calm voice next to her ear made her shudder as Naruto's body slowly revealed itself, along with an incredibly large tiger. Naruto saw Anko looking at her new friend curiously. Do you know Tailong? The cat seemed to shrug at the name. Okay, from now on you can call yourself Tailong. Anko nodded as the tiger approached Kurenai, and made her pet him. Well, you seem quite friendly, Tai. Kurenai turned her head to look at Naruto, a question evident in her eyes. Could you help me prepare for the exams, too? Naruto shrugged slightly. I'll help when I'm free, which seems to be quite often right now. He chuckled at the end, rubbing the back of his neck. Anyway, I'll leave you two alone. Tai and I were heading home after lunch. Anko looked at the tiger and then at Naruto. You just brought him to the village and no one questioned you. Naruto looked at her like she was an idiot for a moment. Kid, not only do I look like an exact copy of my grandfather, but I'm also the Hokage's eldest son. People turn a blind eye when I do things like this, and besides, he's quite kind. If he got scared and tried to attack someone, I'd just cast a genjutsu on them. I can't allow villagers to get hurt when they don't deserve it. Kurenai nodded and looked at Naruto. Are you free now? He nodded slightly. Do you think we could, Anko looked at Kurenai. It was clear her friend didn't know how to talk to men. Can I help you if that's what you're asking? She nodded, a slight blush rising to her face. Do you know how to cast a genjutsu? He nodded and raised his hands to channel chakra, holding the ram seal with both. The area around him transformed into the Uchiha district, causing him to frown before swiftly moving his hand to dispel the illusion. He shot a glare at Kurenai. She lowered her head in shame. I shouldn't have used that illusion. I'm sorry. The demonic scenario has the ability to make the captive see an area that instills fear. Naruto knew that genjutsu perfectly. The scene around them changed as Naruto remained motionless. The clearing was shrouded in a dark mist that obscured their vision. Did you see what I did? He asked, letting the illusion fade. They both shook their heads slightly. A simple trick that can surprise your opponents. Kurenai tries to cast the illusion again, but this time with one hand. The illusion took much longer to form this time, and she saw a small layer of perspiration form on her forehead, glistening in the afternoon sun. With a flick of her wrist, she dispelled it again, letting the district vanish into thin air. Now hold a genjutsu over the hand that channels the chakra. He pointed to her left hand, which hung limply at her side. She felt her illusion slide into place without moving a muscle. Again, he quickly dispelled the genjutsu and looked at Kurenai. The art of illusions is about deceiving your opponent. If you combine it with an evasive fighting style, you could make them believe you're a clone. The raven-haired woman's eyes widened at the idea, as she had never considered such a thing. You mean that while they're distracted searching for your true self, you could attack right in front of them? Naruto nodded at her question and watched as she applied the transformation to her hand and tried again. It was difficult to conjure the illusion while maintaining the genjutsu on her hand and simultaneously attempting to cast demonic landscape on Naruto. It took a while, and Kurenai began to gasp. The genjutsu in her hand trembled, but she had managed to cast the intended genjutsu on Naruto. It'll take some time, but once you master it, we can move on to holding a chain of genjutsu while you cast a multi-layered one. Kurenai began to pale and stagger. Naruto closed the distance and gently lowered her to the ground. You should have told me you were lacking. We could have taken a break, There was a slight hint of concern in his voice, something Kurenai found both exciting and heartbreaking. I didn't mean to waste your time. He looked at her for a few moments before laughing softly. Don't worry about me, Kurenai. Worry about yourself first. Genjutsu, while not the most physically demanding, is the most mentally stressful of the three types. If you start to feel tired or uncomfortable, be careful what you attempt. That was basic genjutsu. It annoyed her a little that he was reciting things she'd already been told. Looking at him, it didn't seem like he was trying to lecture her, but rather protect her. She rested her head on his shoulder, and he interpreted it as exhaustion. He reached inside his loose shirt and pulled out a scroll, scribbling rapidly on it, filling it with lines and lines of information, which made her eyes widen. He finished and tied the ribbon on the outside in a pretty bow before placing it in her lap. Inside is a list of tips and tricks I've found that help me with genjutsu. I don't know if they'll work the same for you, but it won't hurt. He inhaled deeply, absorbing the scent. It was strange, but he knew where it came from. Oddly, he thought of the flowers in his apartment. Belladonna, that was it. Such a strange yet alluring aroma. The plant's berries taste sweet, but they're incredibly toxic. Thinking of Naruto, it seemed fitting, a sweet man, yet incredibly lethal. A sigh escaped her lips as she continued to lean on him. Earth to Kurenai, he interjected, trying to get her attention. Huh, she staggered out, focusing on his face, as it was incredibly close to hers at that moment, which made her blush. I asked you if you were feeling okay. She looked into his bright, golden eyes, feeling them watching her. She placed a hand on her chest, which intensified her blush. I feel a little dizzy. Is it okay if we sit here for a while? She asked, looking completely innocent of trying anything. Yes, that sounds great, he replied, giving her a friendly smile. Perhaps she's not as absent-minded as I thought. Anko murmured to herself from Tai Long, who was lying on the ground beside her. The tiger stretched and gave a big yawn. Well, if you insist, Tai, I'm sure we can go get some dango. The tiger looked at her for a moment before making a gesture that seemed to shake his head and following the dwelling, making sure she didn't get into trouble. Umbu years. As the title suggests, this will be a short section at the end of the chapters for a while, showing snippets of what Naruto did during his years as an Umbu. I hope you enjoy it. A sigh escaped the young man's lips. Having been accepted into the ANBU at the age of 8, he was undoubtedly the youngest recruit. He wore a tracksuit, and a simple white mask covered his face. A katana was positioned across his back as he slowly rose from the ground and faced the Oni-masked ANBU before him. He raised his hand to the tanto and gripped it tightly, feeling this spark of life, as he called it, resonate in the blade and in his body, fusing them to function as a perfect instrument. He slammed his tanto against the karma the Oni held in a reverse grip. The older man quickly threw Naruto aside, but he vanished upon hitting the ground. A genjutsu, but I wonder which part it was, our fight or your disappearance. Was I fighting your true self or a clone? The man pondered, regaining his karma and blocking Naruto's powerful attack. You show too much emotion in your movements. I could feel your ki betraying your position, kid. Naruto smirked smugly just before exploding in the Anbu's face, sending him flying several meters back with a crack running across his mask. The man quickly ran his hand over the crack, and Naruto watched as the mask repaired itself. The Oni won't show his face until he makes his final move. He tilted his head to the side, and Naruto felt a strange sensation just below his ribs. He placed his hand on the area. Wet, he muttered to himself, raising his hand and rubbing it against his old white porcelain mask, leaving 4 long red lines across it. He placed his hand back on the wound and saw the kunai withdrawing it and throwing it to the ground. His hand glowed red-hot for an instant as it struck the wound. Oni had to watch as the boy closed the hole. With his wound closed, Naruto painfully advanced, attempting to strike the man. Oni dodged the first blow, causing Naruto to smirk beneath his mask as he swung his bloodied hand, squirting blood into the man's eyes. The black-haired boy spun around and twirled his tanto again, stopping it just as it grazed the man's skin, feeling a kunai pressed against his throat. You're a real demon, kid. Welcome to ANBU. Oni pulled the kunai from Naruto's throat, and the boy fell to his knees, still clutching his sword, gasping for breath before dropping it to the ground beside him. He felt his mask being removed, but he was too exhausted to do anything about it. Moments later, another one was placed on his head. From now on, you will be Oni. Naruto struggled to nod at the man's words before everything went black. Naruto groaned as he sank down onto the bed. He was exhausted, having just reported to the Hokage after his latest mission. He stretched, yawning, his hands tracing something, ruffled. His crimson eyes snapped open, and as he realized what he'd felt, a black ruffled thong lay on his bed next to jeans, a bra, and a tight t-shirt. Aren't these mine? He stared at the clothes, a wave of confusion washing over him. She doubted they were Anko's, since she knew her room was off limits. During that time, she hadn't noticed the shower was running until it stopped. The soft patter of water hit the floor as someone stepped onto the bathroom tiles. She heard the door slowly open and turned to see who it was. Her crimson eyes burned into his mind as she lay motionless, a towel covering her eyes. Naruto, demonstrating how well he knew what to do in that situation, stared at her in astonishment. What are you doing in my room? Her body froze, her hands, still wrapped in the towel around her hair, covering her eyes. And Naruto, An absolute silence filled the room. Kurenai couldn't think of anything more awkward at that moment. It felt as if Kami were testing her. Hey Kurenai, where are you? Oh, hey Naruto. I didn't know you'd be home so soon. Naruto turned his gaze to Anko, who was standing in the doorway that connected his room to the rest of the house. So you didn't get my message? Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Kurenai grip the towel tighter. Anko shook her head. I guess that was an accident. Well, I'll leave you to get changed. He got out of bed and took a slow step forward, stopping right next to Anko's ear. He leaned in and whispered, "You shouldn't lie, Gaki. It's inappropriate." Anko stiffened as he passed, closing the door behind him. The small gust of wind caused the towel covering Kurenai's body to fall away. As she slowly removed the towel from her head, she could see that her cheeks had turned the same color as her eyes, which were wide and filled with horror. Well, at least I wasn't in the room when it happened. Anko gestured to Kurenai's naked, glistening body, who nodded silently. So I've been sleeping in his bed for the past week, right? Anko nodded thoughtfully, hiding a smile that threatened to burst forth. And my apartment is still under repair, right? Anko nodded again. So what do I do? Anko started thinking, though it wasn't necessary. She'd already thought about it since reading Naruto's letter, which said he'd be coming home today. A mocking smile spread across her face as she slowly walked toward the door and peeked inside, seeing Naruto groping Tai Long, who wanted to be left alone. Hey, Naruto. The man and the tiger tilted their heads comically. Yes. I was wondering if Kurenai could stay tonight. Her apartment is being repaired after a small fire. Anko had an innocent look, while Naruto looked at her with confusion. Of course, you don't need to ask. Kurenai burst through the door, making Anko gasp and Naruto freeze. Are you sure it wouldn't be a bother? Kure-chan. Why yes, Anko. You're half naked, in front of Naruto. There was an eep, and the raven-haired beauty vanished. Wow, how strange. Naruto nodded to Anko, his Sharingan activated. That creamy white skin would be forever etched in his memory. Naruto frowned as he looked at the girl he considered a kind of sister. You, she began before taking a deep breath. You shouldn't get too involved. I like you, but I don't think you can break my curse. She frowned even more and stroked Tai. The tiger seemed to growl softly. Stupid ninjan. Naruto slowly pulled his hand away from the tiger as it spoke. I didn't tell you to stop. I just called you stupid. Anko was sweating. A talking tiger lay in the room. I agree with him to a certain extent. Anko-san, na pressurisa un Uchiha. So you weren't what you seemed. Naruto mused aloud, addressing Tai. And who are you? The great tiger replied. Touched. Anko looked at them both as they stared at each other, her golden eyes glowing a deep red. I must ask you, what are you doing here, Tai Long? The tiger grumbled at the question before standing up and stretching his back. How curious that you guessed my real name. Even so, I'm here under orders. It seems I'm even in hiding. You've attracted the attention of some interesting people. I'm here because of their interest in you. Naruto raised a hand and pressed it against his seal. It burned. Being hidden from the world is hard to explain until you are in that position, isn't it, Naruto? He shot the tiger a look that silenced him. Naruto. I'm fine, Anko. Tai Long just made a mistake. He assumed something false. She nodded hesitantly and slowly left the room. Once Naruto could no longer hear her, he looked down at his hands. The world is locked away from me, to protect you all. So absorbed in what he had said, he didn't notice his bedroom door slowly closing. Dinner was, in a word, quiet. Nobody knew what to say. What could one say? Excuse me? Oh. Naruto was putting the last piece of meat on his plate to his mouth when there was a knock at the door. He excused himself and went to answer it. His father, surrounded by 4 Umbu, entered. Naruto, I have something to tell you. Naruto nodded hesitantly. Following your latest medical report, you are relieved of your duties until further notice. I'm sorry, but it's for your health. The dark-haired boy nodded, looking at his hands. Aren't you going to say anything? Naruto shook his head. What do you have to say, father? Minato grimaced and apologized again as he left, which Naruto dismissed with a gesture. It had to be this way. Little did he know that those parting words would haunt his father for years. Naruto, are you all right? Anko's calm voice broke the silence that had settled in since Minato's departure. With a sad smile, Naruto turned to face her, his Sharingan deactivated, his golden, patterned eyes fixed on the table. Like I said, this is how it has to be. I'll be fine, kid. Anko moaned as Naruto left the room, returned with a blanket and pillow, and sat on the sofa. Please don't be too long. I still have things to do tomorrow. He looked so defeated that Kurenai felt her heart tremble at his words. Tai Long lay down a few feet from Naruto, head bowed and eyes closed, listening to the world around him. Naruto, you don't have to get out of bed for me, he tried to reason. Kurenai, there are many things I am not, and chivalry is not one of them. Then share it with me, he stammered, which made Anko's eyes widen while Naruto looked confused. Is that all right with you? Kurenai glanced at Anko for a moment, who was too surprised to react, before shyly nodding to the man. I'll see you when you come to bed then. The way he said it made her heart race. Sharing a bed with Naruto, her thoughts raced so fast she barely registered them before a new one struck. She watched him get up and leave the room, her only desire to follow him. Anko now ordered her thoughts and looked at the blushing Kurenai before winking at her, moving towards the door since Irika would be coming soon. Be careful with him, okay? I don't want you to exhaust him on the first night. Kurenai could now be called the Scarlet Princess. You know she can probably hear us, right? Anko shrugged. He already knows what I'm like, Kurenai. He accepted me even before he accepted you. You're the one who has something to prove. There was a knock at the door, and Anko turned to open it for Irika and hugged him. Something to prove. Kurenai thought. Anko, thank you. The purple one looked at the beautiful brunette and smiled smugly. Anything for you too. Kurenai shuffled into the room. Naruto was still awake, his Sharingan eyes glowing as he read a scroll. Glancing over, she saw he was focused on sealing techniques, not exactly his area of expertise, but even she could tell he was studying high-level objects, jotting down notes as he went. They quickly pulled out a small book with a strange symbol printed on the cover. Naruto frantically flipped through the pages, trying to find what he was looking for. When he found it, he exclaimed and placed the book near the scroll. Kinshur Ser Ta Toshi, Forbidden City, he murmured, quickly sketching a pattern on a piece of paper. Naruto smiled smugly, and Kurenai felt herself tingle. Though it wasn't meant for her, their expressions seemed to change the atmosphere in the room. Can we talk for a while before we go to sleep? I'd like to get to know you a little better. He raised an eyebrow and turned slowly toward her. His eyes briefly returned to their golden hue. He rolled up the scroll and put his book away. He frowned and lay down, staring at the ceiling, while Kurenai took off her jeans and got into bed. What do you want to know? He paused. He hadn't imagined she'd go this far. She needed something, anything, right now. What's wrong with your eyes? Feeling like slapping herself, she let out a long sigh. You don't have to answer that. She saw the dark-haired man shrug slightly. My golden eyes, well, I got them when I achieved my stage 3 lightning affinity. He gasped as he remained silent. Reaching stage 2 of an affinity was easy enough. Stage 3, well, you'd better prepare yourself for a stay in the hospital, at most. My instructor put me in the field during a storm, explained what was going to happen, and left. I was alone, completely, with no orders or rules, just knowing what was coming. It was a new experience, something that completely overwhelmed me. He took a deep breath as Kurenai listened intently to his every word. I became a lightning rod. For 5 minutes, I became myself. Lightning coursed through my veins. I felt reborn. The experience ended far too quickly for my liking. My instructor, surprised I survived, placed this seal around my eye. My father said my eyes used to be full of hope. After that moment, I became a savage, living in chains, unleashed in a direction the village never wanted to see again. He paused, gathering his hair to show the seal around his eye. Kurenai studied it closely. It looked like the one he had just studied. What are you doing? He froze for a moment. He looked at her with his red eyes. In short, it's a leash. She frowned and turned away, switching off the lights. It was clear she no longer wanted to talk. Respecting her wishes, she placed her hands on her stomach. The ever-tempting scent of belladonna reached her nose. Finally, everything started to click for her when she realized that she was, in fact, in the same bed as her crush. right there in his room, just a stone's throw away. She tried to move forward, but a growl at the foot of the bed stopped her in her tracks. Sorry, I thought I saw something I shouldn't have. Tai Long remained firm in her conviction. Na pressurisa un Uchiha. Flashback. Naruto stood in the middle of the kitchen, hands behind his back, his bulletproof vest peeking out proudly. His father was proud. At 6 years old, his son was a chunin, something unheard of. His golden eyes sparkled as he gazed at the person before him. She was physically beautiful, physically. They threw him to the ground, his cheek throbbing, and with an impassive mask, he got up, just like before. This proves it. You really do look like your mother. As much as he wanted to, Naruto couldn't attack. Naruto fell to his knees in pain, trying with all his might to hide his emotions. My seal won't break. Remember this. I won't let you hurt my daughter. The redhead had a small bump on her stomach, and she rubbed it gently. I'll keep you away from her. Naruto frowned, causing the woman to smile, finally breaking her mask. You're not my real mother. You'll always be my father's second choice. His words froze her to the spot. Her footsteps echoed as she headed for the door, only to collapse in pain. I'm nobody's second choice. Your father loved me first. You whore of a bitch mother. He used his Sharingan on him. Struggling through the pain, Naruto slowly stood up, his golden eyes turning red with 3 tomo in each. He channeled the necessary chakra into his eyes for the Jinjutsu, only for his seal to activate again. How curious. You care so much for your sister that you can't hurt me. She snorted. Let me fix that. Intensifying the pain that tormented him, he pulled out a sealing kit. A few brushstrokes later, he stepped back. Everything you love, of non-Uzumaki descent, will die by your hand. This is my curse upon you. Uchiha, he spat out his clan's name, as if it were mud. It's curious. You, the Red Death, are afraid of a child. How the mighty have fallen. If my mother saw you now, she'd surely laugh, seeing you take what was hers only after her death. Pathetic, just like an Uzumaki, hiding behind paper and ink, claiming to be better, but the truth is everyone knows your clan is afraid to fight. Afraid to get their hands dirty doing the Taishinobi work. You're just like your clan, pathetic and scared. She exhaled as her seal pushed him to the ground, almost bowing before her. I thought the Uchiha were intelligent. Why are you still fighting even though you've lost? Naruto smiled slowly and smugly. You don't even know your own husband. Is he just a source of income for you? Dad never gives up. No matter how bad things look she always finds a way. She repeated, a foot hitting her head and pushing her hard against the ground. So why is your mother still dead? Hate me if you want. This is the first real encounter between them. More will be explained in later flashbacks. Present. Naruto woke with a start. He hated that dream. His hand instantly went to his seal. That was the day he lost his normal vision. Without the Sharingan, he'd be nearly blind. The feedback from the Jinjutsu impacting his eye muscles was simply too much. It exhausted them. Now he could see people's silhouettes and their chakra levels. That was all. His Sharingan had sharpened. It seemed the chakra feedback had somehow developed them. They required almost nothing to maintain. It was both a blessing and a curse. Choosing a life of darkness or a life he would never forget. Everything he saw with his Sharingan was seared into his memory. That's why he couldn't bear to look at the beauty in his bed. Every time he did, he could see her creamy white skin, the delicate drops of moisture running down her legs as her hair framed her beautiful face. Threads of chakra flew around the room as Naruto scribbled a note. It took him less than 15 minutes to get ready, including his shower and morning coffee. Wearing his grandfather's armor, he strode out of the house, Tai Long following behind. His golden eyes surveyed the incomplete landscape around him, tiny traces of chakra floating in the air, residue, waste. What should we do today, Naruto? The black-haired man thought for a moment. What could he do? He froze. Something I should have done a long time ago. Tai tilted his head to the side, following Naruto. Anko woke up shortly after Naruto, silently walking through the house. She reached their room and carefully opened the door so as not to disturb them. You're really afraid to let her in. She was gone, which wasn't surprising. She felt sorry for Kurenai. Her friend had chosen the most difficult person to approach. You know, Naruto hates it when people use his things. Maybe you'll have a chance. Anko turned and left, closing the door behind her. Thank you, Anko. She sank deeper into the sheets, inhaling her scent. She heard the paper crumble, opened her eyes in a daze, and glanced at the note. Karinai, I'm sorry last night. I guess what I mean is that I have trouble dealing with people and seeing them as human beings. They're usually just targets, easy to kill, easy to forget. When emotions come into play, the picture changes to a landscape I don't understand. Anko once told me, almost everything can be solved with sake. I suppose it was me who was asking if you wanted to have a drink later. Naruto, you don't have to apologize, he murmured, looking at the note, which had a strange symbol in the upper corner. Naruto's feet stopped. 2 years, it seemed like only yesterday. Tai Long stood beside him, not daring to move. Naruto would need time. Itachi, did we do the right thing? The streets were cold and lifeless. His red eyes took in every detail. He caused this. He wouldn't forget it. Before, the soft patter of children's feet could be heard. Now, only a breeze stirred their hair. Tai Long, the tiger exclaimed with a soft hum. Is it wrong to kill a corrupt clan for a corrupt village? Am I wrong for obeying orders? Sitting on his hind legs, Tai Long rested a paw against Naruto, causing the man to lower his gaze. An evil man won't question what he does. That doesn't mean you're good, but you're not evil. Generally, there's no difference between the two. For example, a young girl steals medicine from a story. Is she good or bad? Naruto responded instantly. It's a crime, therefore she must be punished. The tiger shrugged and led Naruto a little further into the enclosure. But what if I told you it was to save his sick grandmother? What if I told you the shop owner is corrupt and overcharges? Naruto was about to answer, but stopped mid-step and looked at Tai Long. Committing crimes for someone else. Is that what it means to care about someone else? Tai tilted his head from side to side. Yes and no, but that's not what I meant. I can't answer what you meant. I don't feel strong enough to do something like that. The big white cat nodded. At least you're honest. Well, even if you're not, you believe it. Naruto looked at him for a moment. You were ordered to kill all the Uchiha. And yet, 3 of you are still alive. Why? A pattern of Fuma's shurikens quickly formed in his red eyes. Are we on the defensive because of that night? Well, I don't even know what to feel, what to say, or what to do about what happened. Should I be sorry? Should I be glad the mission was over? Should I feel disgusted for having killed my relatives? I doubt you'd appreciate being called kinslayer. Naruto's primal growl was enough of an answer for the tiger. This is something you'll have to deal with. Don't you have a promise to keep? Naruto raised an eyebrow and turned to face the tiger. It was gone. Am I going crazy? They say you can see the dead wandering around here. I can't. What do you think of this area? He turned away, and the little boy gasped. Do you want something to eat? The small, black-haired boy looked at him suspiciously. I haven't kept my promise until now, and I've come to make it up to you. Who are you? Naruto smiled, showing his red eyes to the child. My name is Uchiha Naruto. I knew your mother. She helped me a lot. I guess I just wanted to help her somehow. Sasuke was fascinated by the man in front of him. I've heard about you. Itachi, he spoke about you several times. He said you were like a beast, with the world in your jaws, unsure whether to protect it or destroy it. Naruto understood the way he spoke about Itachi. It seemed the boy hated him deeply, something he would have to work on. I gave your brother a choice, and I'll give you the same one. Sasuke looked ready to reject it immediately, but he suppressed his anger and nodded slowly. Would you like to learn from me? When we have some free time, of course. Sasuke raised an eyebrow. What can you do? Naruto smiled. Sasuke lay panting on the ground, staring at the man before him. Not a single speck of dust covered his red armor. I have one condition. Sasuke snorted and nodded, too tired to do anything else. Use what I teach you to protect, not to take revenge. Anger flashed in Sasuke's eyes, and Naruto effortlessly immobilized him. Look what that path did to your brother. Forgive me, Itachi, Naruto lied, his eyes wide with shock. I won't become my brother. Naruto stepped away from him, extended a hand, and helped the boy up from the ground. All right, see you at the entrance to Training Ground 44 tomorrow after class. The boy nodded, and Naruto awkwardly placed a hand on Sasuke's head. They both turned and left without another word. Naruto left feeling better than he had in a long time, while Sasuke was left with a lot to think about. Kurenai walked along the ground, not even the grass making her think of her impending death. She placed her kunai, held in a reverse grip, against the back of her neck. "You failed." His voice startled her. She spun around and saw him sitting on a patch of grass that had passed by. No, it moved around that patch of grass. She could see his footprints, curving around where he had been sitting. It felt like I was walking in a straight line. Naruto smiled with his eyes closed. "Try again." Kurenai watched him intently, walking slowly, trying to maintain her posture. She stopped in front of him. She turned slowly and saw the curved path. "Jinjutsu, making someone believe what doesn't exist. I won't cast the second part, try again." Kurenai nodded and returned to where she had been before. "You haven't eaten yet, have you?" Why would that matter? Naruto still hadn't opened his eyes. He seemed to be meditating. She knew he was doing something. What was it? "You'll see in a moment." He went to take a step, but fell to his knees. The world was spinning. Smells like pancakes." Kurenai looked up and tried to glare at her, quickly lowering her head. She felt bad. "When you can master this technique or figure out how it works, I'll help you design a new Jinjutsu." She stared at him, shocked, completely forgetting what had happened last time. "Can you turn it off?" "It is. Your body will take some time to readjust." Naruto wondered if she would get anything out of that hint. He moved closer to help Kurenai, extending his arm to comfort her. A burning sensation gripped his left eye. He slowly withdrew his arm. "Kushina," he growled, making Kurenai look at him. "Naruto." The concern in her voice hurt him. "I'm sorry, it was nothing. I'll wait until you recover." She sat down on the grass, closing her eyes. "Everything you love will die because of you." Naruto seemed lost in his own world. Kurenai leaned slowly forward, quickly raised her hand, and gripped it tightly around his wrist. Suddenly, his eyes widened, and he released her. "I'm sorry. You apologized too much." He looked up and met her ruby-red eyes, unable to look away. Luckily, he didn't have to. She hadn't fully recovered yet. Flashback. Itachi lay on the ground, surrounded by a pool of his own vomit. He wiped his mouth with his sleeve, looking up and meeting the gaze of his veteran comrade. "Is that what I felt?" Naruto nodded to the boy. "I think I've got it." Naruto looked at him curiously. "It's the power of suggestion. I know its weakness, even if I'm wrong about its effect." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "You can't move while using it." A small smile appeared on his face. "I don't have to." Itachi lowered his gaze. The vomit surrounding him had vanished. In front of him stood Naruto with a kunai pressed against his throat. "I can make you come to me without you even realizing it." Naruto smiled, a perfectly normal smile, but it shocked him deeply. He was nothing compared to this man. Why did they call him a prodigy? He swallowed nervously as the kunai remained motionless. "Did you enjoy the voice of Kami?" Itachi froze as more and more Narutos appeared around him, each one holding an Itachi at knife point. "Answer me, Itachi. If you think you're here, where are you really?" The boy looked around. It was frightening. He couldn't tell if it was him or what Naruto wanted him to believe. "This Jinjutsu is confusing," the teenager said, making Naruto laugh as he put the kunai away. End of flashback. Uchiha-sama. Naruto groaned. It seemed Asuma was more than happy to spread the word that he was the former Yanbiyu commander. He nodded as the Yanbiyu watched him on their knees. Kurenai could barely stand, but she managed. "What would you ask of me?" He grunted, his eyes widening slightly. He knew this Umbu. How could he forget that purple hair? "Hokage-sama needs you immediately." Naruto stood up and looked at Kurenai. "Nico, could you take care of Kurenai until she recovers?" I showed her Kami's voice. Nico shuddered, but nodded quickly. "You didn't give him the same test you gave us, did you?" Naruto smiled and disappeared in black flames. "What did he do to them?" The purple-haired Umbu laughed nervously. "It ended with everyone pointing swords at us, thinking it was him. He was happily sitting upside down on the ceiling, watching. That was quite a story about chakra control and power. Having a room full of ANBU at his whim. What a terrifying thought." Naruto appeared in his father's office. He immediately wanted to go home. "Uzumaki-san, Hokage-sama," he said, bowing politely. You called him? Kushina snapped, making Minato frown. Give me the name of someone more qualified. I'll gladly go find them myself. She glanced at Minato and Naruto. Yes, she knew she would definitely be sleeping on the couch for a while. There's only one reason you'd call me here with Natsumi present. Minato nodded, confirming his suspicion. Are you sure you want to do this? Better yet, have you asked Natsumi if she's okay with it? A blonde girl slowly emerged from behind Kushina. Naruto crouched down to her level, revealing his golden eyes. Will this keep the demon away? Naruto shuddered at her words and looked at Kushina, who was smiling smugly. I can't force him to leave, but I can show him that you're in charge. He offered a faint smile. His chakra glowed with joy. Looking at himself, he was a whirlwind of emotions. I accept then, do what you must. Naruto nodded. Keep this up and he won't stand a chance. She gave this friendly stranger a radiant smile. Father, I'm ready. Put your hand on my back. You're coming with me. Minato nodded and formed the ram seal, placing his free hand on his son's back as he sat down. Natsumi understood what he was saying. Father, Naruto looked at her, puzzled for a moment. It doesn't matter now. Please sit down. The girl responded quickly and sat down, crossing her legs and resting her hands in her lap. Look me in the eyes, this is going to hurt a little. She nodded as Naruto placed his right hand on her forehead. Her eyes glowed red and 3 worlds went dark. Naruto knew this place well. He was the first to recover and helped the other 2 to their feet. Both panting heavily, Naruto turned to look at the small blonde girl. Welcome to your mind. She looked at him for a moment and nodded slowly. Honestly, she had no idea what was going on. This feels weird. The comment made Naruto laugh. That's how it should be. This isn't your head. The only reason I'm used to it is that. Well, you'll soon find out. Minato nodded, as did Natsumi, following the black-haired man as he trudged through the sewer. You, the fox screamed as Naruto entered his vision. Are you going to be stubborn, or will you be a good fox and listen to what I have to say? He heard the growls behind the cage and went through the bars, while Natsumi and Minato told him to stop. The enormous beast raised its claw to knock Naruto down. He frowned and raised his hand before vanishing and reappearing above the fox's head, striking it hard, which caused it to growl. Stop being a nuisance. For a demon lord, your behavior is unbecoming. The fox began to thrash about, and Naruto electrocuted it again. Is that how you treated me the first time? Naruto shook his head at the fox's question. I used my eyes to deceive him and force him to commit suicide. Now will you listen to me? The fox stopped and glared angrily at Naruto. Kurama. Naruto smirked at his astonished expression. I'm going to get off me, and when I do, we'll talk. If you try to attack me, I'll trap you in a hell you can't escape. Natsumi and Minato watched in shock as Naruto made an obscene gesture at the fox's head, which landed softly on the ground. The large beast crouched down to their level. We're equals. The fox snorted until Naruto lifted his left tuft of hair. A gift from my stepmother. I love it so much I take it everywhere. I don't need your sarcasm. The fox spoke listlessly. Actually, it was good to talk to someone, even if it was an Uchiha. With the world locked up, well, I'll make this quick. Natsumi's the boss. If you behave, I'll show her how to let you roam the world as a civilian. The fox was about to roar at Naruto. There are 2 other ways to do this, and neither is pleasant. Do you want to accept the one that will grant you freedom if you behave? Ninjin, the persistent one. If the blonde looks anything like you, I'll accept her. Naruto smiled slightly. I don't know if she's like me. It's the first time I've met her. But if you do anything to hurt my little sister, you'll be begging for death to claim you. Naruto's voice was so cold it could cut through steel. The fox narrowed his eyes, but saw that Naruto's attitude was changing. Madara, did that old man have a son? A daughter. I am her son. The fox raised an eyebrow. Naruto opened the locket he wore around his neck and showed it to him. I'm sorry for your loss. And I, yours, am here if you need to talk. Kurama nodded. It was strange talking to someone who knew everything about you. Natsumi, father, you can come if you want. Naruto saw Kurama's furious glare as he looked at the man who had put him there. Natsumi bowed to the fox, just like Minato. Naruto found this incredibly strange. Q dash. Can I get a new ninjin? Kurama looked at Naruto, waiting for his answer. The man with jet black hair stifled a laugh as little Natsumi tried to contain herself. You heard your brother. My name is Kurama. Natsumi glared at him, but nodded. Kurama, I'm looking forward to working with you. The large fox raised an eyebrow at Naruto, who shrugged. Do you want me to establish a link so you two can talk? Or have you already got that sorted, Kurama? Kyubi snorted and rolled his eyes. You have a better temper than my other half, and before we go, there's something I need to show you. The group nodded as Naruto lifted his left bangs, revealing the seal around his eye. Natsumi, thinking it was a tattoo, complimented him on how cool it looked. The entire room cooled down, though not because of Naruto. Kurama wasn't angry. That's not cool. It's a leash, a brand. It's used to subjugate you to someone's will. Don't you ever say those disgusting things in front of me again. Kurama roared. The waters around him had vanished from the force of his voice. Naruto, is this what I think it is? Naruto nodded sadly to his father. What's going on? Natsumi-chan, that's an Uzumaki seal. Umbu years. Naruto gasped on the ground. His mask, though he treasured it, was a hindrance. He pulled it aside and emptied his stomach. A firm hand patted him on the back. Well done, Oni, you killed the traitor. So why don't I feel like I did it right? Naruto wiped his mouth and caught a bottle that was thrown at him, twisting the cap and washing his face and mouth. So this is what a level 3 lightning release can do to a body, huh? Naruto nodded weakly, still trying to catch his breath. I don't think that was a peaceful way to die. No need to worry about it, right, Oni? Rat was a rat, not worthy of entering our lair, Snake. The man chuckled behind his snake mask. That was him. Was he delicious, Oni? This man used to annoy Naruto, but he was the veteran on his team. A rat can't provide me with a proper meal, not even a small Oni. He gave his companion a sadistic smile, which caused him to gasp. Oni, you have pieces of rib in your mouth. Naruto panicked and tried to wash it off quickly, but stopped when he saw Snake clutching his sides. Sorry, it was your hair, not your mouth. Naruto groaned as he got up and stood shakily, but he didn't stay standing for long. He was quickly thrown over the snake's shoulder. The man threw the Oni mask over Naruto's face and headed back to headquarters. People made way for them. Their work was well known. It was surprising that Naruto was chosen at such a young age. He was only 10 years old and already an enforcer. An enforcer, simply put, is an Umbu trained to kill Umbu. When the old Oni disappeared after passing by Naruto, the snake quickly caught him, keeping him close ever since. They didn't just hunt Umbu. No, they hunted everyone from the highest ranks down to civilians. If it was necessary to kill them to protect the hidden leaf, an enforcer was already watching them. Does this seem strange to you, Oni? Naruto grumbled at the man's question. I guess you're right. They should sell pizza on Thursdays. Sometimes I wonder if you act like this to annoy me. Snake put Naruto down and patted him on the head. Does it work? Not as well as it should be. Snake chuckled at Naruto's comment. What am I going to do with you, Oni? Did Kushina do this? Minato's voice was like a steel bolt that pierced the air of depression and shock surrounding the group. Naruto nodded weakly and let his bangs fall, collapsing to his knees a moment later. Phew, the delay wasn't as long as I suspected. She coughed into her hand, wiping the blood that covered her trousers. The wound began to drip from her mouth. She turned her head and smiled at her father. I can get you both out, but I don't know how long I'll last once I'm out. Cough. I thought it would be good for you to know cough. After all, my job is to protect the village Ofani threat. Minato placed a hand on his son's shoulder. I'll fix it. Just get me out of here, okay? Good job, Naruto. Naruto struggled to nod as Minato felt the pull in his body, sending him back to his office. He didn't give himself time to recover, crossed the room like a bolt of lightning, and slammed his wife against the wall. Get her out. Her hair was casting shadows over his face. She tried to stammer, only to be slammed roughly against the wall again. That Esami-san, Kushina. Remove the damned seal. He jerked his head up, his eyes blazing with untamed anger. A look of defeat crossed his face. He pushed it away. I did it all for you and Natsumi. I just want you to know this. She staggered towards Naruto and saw something that froze her to the spot. See, come on, sir, don't die on me. Naruto was in his daughter's arms. She kept talking to him, trying to keep him awake as he bled. Kushina clenched her fists and looked at her husband. The look of betrayal on his face hurt her more than anything at that moment. She rummaged in her bag, pulling out a kunai. She was forced to stop when 4 Umbu harassed her with drawn swords, ready to strike. If you don't let me do this, he'll die. He spat, raising the kunai and opening his hand, covering it with the blood as it splattered across his face. He threw the kunai aside and quickly traced the seal around his eye with his blood. With a deep sigh, he raised his hands to form the ram seal. Kai began to evaporate, taking the seal with it. I did it for both of us. With her head bowed, there was a small thud followed by a slap. Kushina staggered backward, glancing up just enough to see her daughter trembling. I didn't want this. You hid my brother, caged him like an animal. What kind of father would do such a thing? Natsumi clenched her fists and lunged at her mother. A large hand gently covered hers, stopping her. She did it to protect you. Don't hate your mother. You don't know how lucky you are. Her hand slowly withdrew. A yellow blur crossed the room, quickly gathering her son and disappearing in a golden light. Natsumi-chan, I was trying to protect you. He's Dash. He's my brother. Kushina shuddered at the anger in her daughter's voice. What? What you did was wrong. I can't hate you, but I don't know if I'll ever be able to forget it. Natsumi stormed out of the room, leaving her mother behind, stammering. Yugao froze. Kurenai knelt on the ground, in shock. Kurenai had just heard information she assumed was only meant for the Umbu. How could this have happened? The masked woman from Nico asked. She couldn't fathom that something like this could have occurred. They implanted it before he became a Chunin. It was supposed to activate as soon as the Hokage-sama saw him. Yugao shuddered. He was a Chunin at 6 years old. How could anyone do that to a child? How is he? The Umbu in front of her stiffened in his place. Naruto-sama, you're in very bad shape. You're not getting worse, but you're not getting better either. Your body will burn out if you keep trying to maintain your condition. The telltale signs of a body swoop were heard, and Kurenai vanished. Thank you, it's a lot to ask, but can you find Anko and let her know? Mitarashi Anko has just been sent on a mission with a group of ANBU by the Hokage-sama. Yugao frowned beneath her mask. I suppose he already knows. Thank you, Snake. I know how you felt about him, she murmured, clutching her arms tightly. No problem. Naruto taught me to be better than I was. My loyalty to him is second only to that of the Hokage. The man stood at attention. Sometimes I wonder about that, Snake. He rubbed his head under Yugao's accusing gaze. Old habits die hard. You still want to follow all his orders, don't you? She froze, giving Snake the answer he needed. Snake turned and vanished, leaving Yugawa in his place. Naruto-sama, what would become of me without you? He reflected, gazing at the sky. He remembered how Kurenai had treated him and frowned. I don't think I deserve your time. Kurenai was in the waiting room of Konoha Hospital, her fists clenched and buried in the desk. Kurenai, you're making a terrible noise down here, said a sleepy blonde man, leaning against the wall, his head throbbing. Sorry, Hokage-sama, I didn't see you. He made a dismissive gesture with his hand, slowly moving away from the wall. If I ordered you to kill my son, would you do it? He watched as the dark-haired beauty, who had become his son, stiffened and staggered. I don't know, Hokage-sama. Minato smiled from where he was, which confused her. Tonight, I realized something. I failed my son as a father. I want to believe that tonight I took the first steps to correct what I did wrong. Sadly, it should never have happened. I don't know if he'll ever forgive me. Part of me hopes not. I don't want you to make the same mistake, okay? She nodded, her smile widening as he approached, placing a hand on her head. That's an order. Now come with me. I assume you've come to see him, haven't you? Oh, hello, Hokage-sama. She gave a quick bow and allowed herself to be escorted to her room. She felt a fixed gaze on her as she walked beside the Hokage. It made her nervous. Minato placed his hand on the door. Just so you know, he's had better days. Kurenai swallowed and took a deep breath, nodding slightly. Minato opened the door. The sound of machines working hard filled the air. The room was full of Umbu. 4 of them stood directly behind the medics as they worked, their foreheads covered in sweat. It remained to be seen whether it was from exertion or pressure. His hair wasn't shiny like usual. No, it looked dry and sickly, just like its owner. His body was bandaged, with a machine over his mouth to help him breathe while he kept his eyes closed. He tried to see it as a training exercise. Soon he would open them and tell him he had failed, shattering any illusions he might have. He began to plead inwardly, begging him to open them. He's had better days, hasn't he? The voice shocked those present, who looked around as Tai Long suddenly appeared. The Ambu prepared to attack. Stop! They paused and bowed their heads toward Kurenai. Even Minato was looking at her. She's been living with Naruto for a while now. He's kind of like a partner. She felt nervous under their gaze. I'm sorry, but we'll keep you under strict surveillance, sir. Minato spoke to the tiger. It was a little stranger than talking to toads. Tai Long, call me Tai. So, his cage was removed? I take it. Minato looked at the mysterious tiger and nodded uneasily. The seal had already begun to destroy his body. He knew we had no doctors to heal him, so he froze him almost to death. The machines are barely keeping him alive, while the only person I trust to heal him is being hunted. Minato clenched his fists as he spoke. I've done everything I could, but his life hangs in someone else's hands. Kurenai shuddered at the tone of his voice. The description of Naruto's condition hadn't helped her at all. There were sounds of things being knocked over through the door. Minato turned and opened it. An ANBU member, furious, was kneeling with a blade to Kushina's throat. Hokage-sama, you were disturbing the patients. The ANBU spoke without even turning around. I suppose Natsumi isn't far away then. His response was that the Umbu raised his arm and pointed just to his left, where his blonde daughter stood, barely needing to be restrained, calmly with two Umbu hands resting on her shoulders. Nico, bring them here. Kushina deserves to see what she's done. The Umbu with the cat mask growled, but gently lifted the redhead and dragged her into the room, forcing her to look at the motionless body. All heads turned to stare at her, while the Umbu restrained themselves from attacking. Of everything that's happened, your stepmother, who's supposed to protect you, hurt you the most. If we hadn't been ordered to let you live, she would have killed you already. Nico, that's enough. As I said, Naruto will decide her punishment. The ANBU shuddered slightly, even feeling a pang of pity for the redhead. Kurenai stood before Kushina, trembling, her beautiful hair obscuring her eyes. What kind of monster are you? She whispered, and in the silence of the room, it was as clear as day. He gives his all, works harder than anyone I've ever seen. Even after he was relieved of his duties, he helped train his subordinates. He took Anko and me in when we had nowhere else to go. He's not one bit guilty. So please, tell me why you did this. Kurenai pleaded, tears welling in her eyes as she looked up. Kushina peeked out and searched for the right words. I did it to protect my family. He is your family. Kurenai responded angrily and punched him in the stomach, bending the head of the Uzumaki clan. Kurenai, that's enough. Minato's cold voice came through. Everyone who isn't here, leave. This room is off limits until further notice. Natsumi shook her head as she moved forward, slowly taking Naruto's hand. Rest, Oniai-chan. I want to hear about your adventures someday. Minato looked at his daughter and placed a hand on her head. It must be very difficult for her. So much information crammed into her head in just one day. He saw the small tear run down her face as she slowly let go. I'll see you soon, okay? She nodded and left the room, pushing past everyone else. Minato looked at the tiger and gestured for it to leave. It's not going to happen. Besides, Naruto was going to help Sasuke Uchiha train tomorrow. Do you think someone could take his place? Tai asked as he shifted and settled himself on the ground. I'll have someone look after Sasuke tomorrow. The great tiger nodded his head before resting it on his paws. Uchiha Sasuke. The black-haired boy had just left the academy when he was surrounded by 4 ANBU. What's wrong? The one who spoke, clearly a woman, took a step forward, approaching the boy. Uchiha Naruto is incapacitated. He won't be able to train you for a while. Sasuke snorted and tried to walk past. I should have expected something like this. Itachi was right. He's a beast. He didn't have time to react when the purple-haired Umbu lifted him from the ground, immobilized him, and now placed a sword next to his ear. You'd better not insult our former commander over something that's none of his business. As I was saying, we offered to replace him, so he fulfilled his part of the bargain, in part. You'll receive training, but it will be from the four of us, not from Naruto-sama. He removed his knee from Naruto's chest and lifted him off the ground. The students around them stared at the ANBU, keeping their distance most of the time. Hi, Nico-chan. Nico turned to find Natsumi beaming. I thought you'd still be taking care of Oniai-chan. She tilted her head, confused. I'm helping Naruto-sama by training Uchiha Sasuke. I'll be on duty protecting him tonight. Why do you ask? Natsumi leaned forward and looked at the purple-haired Umbu. Hee, no reason, Natsumi said, laughing as she walked away. Goodbye, Nico-chan. Yugao looked at her. She was very strange, almost as strange as drunk Naruto. A small chill ran down her spine. It was a bad night to be at ANBU headquarters. Nico Taishu, should we have someone check her out? A myriad of thoughts raced through Yugao's head, settling on the last and most important one. Naruto-sama had the protection of at least one squad at all times. Naruto-sama, if he's protected by ANBU, he'll be fine. Saying those words unsettled her. Senju Tsunade, come with us. The blonde Senju looked at the Umbu surrounding her and instantly noticed that one of them wasn't an Umbu. He had purple hair tied back in a pineapple-shaped ponytail. Would you? She raised an eyebrow as Shizen gripped her pig tightly. Why are you from Konoha? The Hokage-sama has ordered you to return and heal some wounded. Anko stepped forward and knelt. Tsunade-sama, we need you to return, please? The Senju shuddered slightly and took a step back. I think you have some explaining to do, don't you? 3 more ENBU squads surrounded her. Or can we walk and talk? Anko asked, nodding and standing up. This was just in case you didn't come quietly. We need you to heal Uchiha Naruto. Tsunade stopped abruptly and looked up at the sky. The son of prophecy, huh? That's a bit of a risky question, you know. Anko nodded as she moved. Our doctors failed. He knew they would. So he put his body in a kind of suspended animation until someone could cure him. We hope that someone is you. Otherwise, we have no idea who to turn to. She raised her arms and shook her head. You're practically our last hope. Besides, in case you were thinking of escaping, every ANBU accompanying me is an enforcer trained by Naruto himself. They all volunteered for this mission. Tsunade looked around and saw the different types of weapons they used. Sickles, chains, karma, some scythes, and even 1 or 2 broadswords. This was definitely not your standard ANBU squad. Enforcers, they weren't here when I left. What are they doing? An Umbu wearing a Hanya mask stepped aside and stood beside the Senju woman. We, the executioners, huh? Well, Naruto-sama trained us to hunt down rogue jonin and higher-ranking members. But mostly, we accept missions that no one else should know about. The Senju woman was about to snort when she felt 16 distinct pricks all over her body, causing her to shudder. Looking around, it seemed no Umbu had moved. I understand, but if you have such a high rank, why did the pineapple head speak? Anko looked at the group and pouted. Hee, because Anko-chan is so cute. The group fell silent. The ENBU turned towards a man wielding a large scythe. Wolf, you're a freak, shut up. She ran her hand over where her mouth would be, showing that she had closed it. Forgive him, some of us needed to change. Fitting into this life isn't for everyone. Anko looked at the Hanya woman with a questioning expression. Did Naruto have to change? The ENBU seemed to look around for a few moments before they started laughing. Naruto was born for work, honey. You should have seen the test he put the recruits through this time. Yugao trembled while on guard. Something was wrong with the world. Taicho, are you all right? He bowed his head. Am I all right? What? The ENBU mask was empty. He reached for the sword he carried on his back. T-shirt. The 3 Umbu froze. The curtains interrupted their work, and the machine stopped. The masked figure removed the blank sheet from his face. Scars crisscrossed it as a malicious smile threatened to spill over. His golden eyes gleamed as he unsheathed his kunai, aiming it at Naruto's jugular. Little Oni, let's see what you've been up to during my absence. It was damp and dark. The air was thick with fell chakra. The golden-eyed man strode through the sewer's corridors, stopping as he reached a large room. I thought I sensed you out there. The voice came from behind bars. 2 pairs of crimson eyes watched the shadowy man. The man advanced towards the bars, with a large fox lunging at them. Ninjin, what is this trash doing in our lair? I don't know, Kurama, but I think we should finish off that demon. A large white tiger advanced and stood beside Naruto. Deception is a wonderful art, isn't it? Snorted Naruto, grabbing a chair from the floor and sitting down. Why don't you sit down? It's been so long, after all. With a flick of her wrist, she pulled another chair up from the floor. You've improved at this, little Oni. I see you've been working hard on your inner demon. The big fox bared his teeth and growled at the man. I see you made it to stage 3 too. It wasn't as fun as I told you, was it? The golden-eyed man chuckled softly. No, it was exactly as you described. I felt reborn. I even used a Jinjutsu to counterattack, just like you. It's interesting, blurring people's silhouettes, seeing sounds and chakra reserves, as well as when people use them up. If I could see smells, I'd call it the perfect tracking eye. Naruto raised his eyebrows as he looked at the man. Now that you've seen the world as I have, what do you think? If you take away the color, reduce everything to its most basic form, what are you left with? The two looked at each other for a while, seemingly arriving at the same answer. Morality and loyalty. He spoke just in time, making the Kyuubi a little nervous. It was frightening to think what these two lightning rods could accomplish. You know, I stood by your bed for a while, wondering whether I should kill you or not. Two occupants narrowed their eyes while one raised an eyebrow. Have you made a decision yet? Naruto asked calmly, surprising the two who were nearby. No, I just stood there. I felt stupid after a while, so I came in here. Naruto frowned. That didn't sound like the man he knew. How does it feel now that the seal has disappeared? He asked, receiving a shrug from the three occupants. I don't feel the need to brutally kill the people who live in my house, if that's what you meant. The man sitting on the other side of the bars shook his head. That's not what I meant. How does it feel to be free after taking off the leash and shock collar? Naruto's eyes widened at the word, enunciating it several times to savor it. That word is still beyond my grasp. I see you've perfected your time-altering barrier. A chuckle escaped the solitary man. I've completed it, not perfected it. Naruto smiled as the fox looked between them. Ninjin, why are you telling him that your jutsu isn't perfect? The lonely man gave a chilling smile. Because I know the weakness behind his greatest jutsu. This made Naruto laugh from where he was sitting. Now I have quite different skills. It seems you've entered a lair you know nothing about, outnumbered. But are you outnumbered? Who knows? Will you draw your sword first, or will it be a peaceful conversation? We should already have the answers to all these questions, but here I am, sitting, pondering. Naruto rested his elbow on his leg, his hand steady as his head leaned against it. He closed his eyes and tilted his head, a slight smile on his face. You're as strange as I remember, always overthinking things, but never voicing the question you really want answered. What if? Maybe if you thought about the consequences of doing something, you wouldn't get into such trouble. Naruto frowned and shrugged a moment later. I enjoy being odd, asking questions that many simply guess. It makes your opponent think more, makes them more dangerous. It's fun when they fight with their mind. Besides, I suppose you're already fixing me up, getting me out of another troublesome mess, as you would say. The tiger raised his head to see the two men in similar positions, quickly lowered it, and went back to sleep. Their conversation had bored him quite some time ago. Actually, I'm a little surprised I even thought about killing you in the first place. It seems pretty pointless now that I'm healing you. And you call me a stranger? The house was so quiet she couldn't bring herself to leave. Now she felt the need to stay. A deep sigh escaped her lips as she stood up, her black hair swaying with her steps as she approached the table. Her red eyes scanned the information in front of her. Bad Blood, written by Uchiha Madara. It was in front of her, flipping through the first few pages of the book, which dealt with the Senju and the Uchiha, and she paused, gazing at the final valley. It was a drawing based on the Uchiha's description. Madara and Hashirama were locked in a heated battle. Above them loomed the Kyuubi and a strange wooden statue. You two were truly unique. Flipping through the next few pages, he stopped when he saw a name that caught his eye. Uzumaki. Isn't Kushina-sama an Uzumaki? Reading further down, she discovered that the two clans had been fighting even longer than the Uchiha and the Senju. The blood of the whirlpool can wash away the darkness. That sentence made no sense to her, and after flipping through a few more pages, she was forced to put the book down. His arms closed tightly around her waist. Diagrams covered the page, showing how to achieve level 3 manipulation. They were all disgustingly brutal. Would Naruto approve of you reviewing these books? A calm voice whispered in her ear. She jumped, her hands scanning the seals, attempting a hasty genjutsu. It worked, but he simply dismissed it. Not bad, still miles away from containing me in one. The figure moved forward, brushing the book with his hand. Kurenai threw him a kunai, and the masked man caught it by slipping a finger through the loop. Can you stop, please? I'm trying to read. He didn't even look up from the pages. Finding what he was looking for, he pulled out a blank parchment and copied it. He rolled it up and tucked it into his pants, the blank mask staring at Kurenai. He's awake now. What do you mean? This man was different. I couldn't recognize anything about him. His body still can't be fixed. The man chuckled. It was a parting gift. In return, I was able to reread this book. Thank you for making it easy to find. He vanished, without smoke or anything to indicate he was gone. He was simply gone. She grabbed the keys from the counter, locked the house, and ran across town. First, she checked the hospital to see if what the man said made sense. As she entered, she saw Ambu, doctors, and nurses rushing about. A blurry blonde figure sped past her as she made her way down the corridor toward Naruto's room. I told you I'm fine. That voice, her face lighting up at the sound, ran down the corridor only to be stopped by an ANBU squad. Why are you still bothering me? I'm fine. Naruto-sama, we must finish the test before authorizing it. He heard movement in the room. The door opened and revealed Naruto wearing a hospital gown. You can finish the test while I move. I'm hungry. A small hand landed on his shoulder, making him raise an eyebrow. Naruto-sama, please rest. I'll bring you whatever you'd like to eat. His shoulders seemed to slump in defeat. All right, Nico, I'd like a barbecue, if it's still open, and if not, some peanut sauté noodles. He turned his head down the hall and saw Kurenai standing there. Are you hungry? She tried to shake her head, but her stomach sadly got in the way and growled. Make it 3. Knowing you, Nico, you haven't eaten yet either. Just let me get my wallet. Naruto went back into the room. Nico came out and looked at Kurenai. Wait, that'll be 4. Someone forgot to feed Tai. She came out again and handed a wad of bills to the cat-faced Ambu. Hello, Naruto-sama, I'll be back soon. Her purple hair swayed to the rhythm of her hips as she swayed down the corridor, attracting the attention of the male Ambu. You can let Kurenai go. Like I said, I'm fine. He waved a hand, turned, and went into his room. He sat back down on the bed, instantly bothered by his father and the doctors. How long are these tests going to last? And are you sure you're not hungry, Hokage-sama? Minato just sighed. Call me Minato. It feels strange being treated with so much respect. I don't deserve it. Naruto shook his head. You're an excellent shinobi. That deserves respect. Besides, you haven't answered my question. Naruto was being pricked with needles, and his hands ran over him as they performed the tests. They shouldn't take more than 15 minutes. Besides, I ate at home, and that's not what I meant, Naruto. The dark-haired boy shrugged. He looked at Kurenai, who was standing there with a puzzled expression. Snake, could you bring Kurenai a chair? Her question was answered when a chair unfolded beneath the crimson-eyed beauty. Why are you so quiet? Her question was directed at Kurenai. All eyes turned to her, and she felt embarrassed at being the center of attention. WL, there was someone strange at your house. I was just thinking that. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Minato turned to her and looked her straight in the eyes. Was he wearing a blank ANBU mask? Kurenai nodded stiffly, giving him the answer he feared. Look, Naruto, he can come into your house whenever he wants. Naruto sighed as he brushed the bangs that covered his left eye behind his ear, revealing his golden eyes to the world. Minato, like I said, would be dead if he wanted. He even caught me with the ANBU guards. We talked, he healed me, and I let him skim one of my books. He saw Kurenai stiffen and chuckled. Did you read Bad Blood, Kurenai? She nodded, a worried expression on her face. My grandfather and my clan had interesting worldviews. Did you get to the ninjutsu section? He touched his eyes as he spoke, making her gasp. Naruto, This is serious. The ENBU couldn't stop him tonight. The Uchiha simply sighed. He's dangerous, yes, but I'm the only one who can fight him. He knows it, which is why he won't attack me when I'm not at my best. He shook his head. Besides, I was only here to talk and get information from my books. He asked me to, unlike others. He stuck his tongue out at Kurenai, making her blush. The rest of the tests ended in relative calm. Only Naruto's rumbling stomach dared to break the peace. Yugao returned shortly after with bags full of noodle boxes. A small brown bag was placed to one side. The Yinbyu looked at Naruto for a moment. I almost forgot. He snapped his fingers as he cast a genjutsu on Naruto's face. To anyone but him, it looked as if he was still wearing his mask. He removed it and set it aside, surprising Kurenai. Thank you, Nico, and Kurenai too. If you try to break the genjutsu, she has the right to kill you. Kurenai swallowed as a box of noodles fell into her lap. How long was I unconscious? Yugao tilted her head, slurping a large mouthful of noodles and taking a deep breath before speaking. 3 days. Things have been pretty quiet around here. And besides, that Uchiha brat needs a change of heart. Naruto sighed as he picked at his noodles, slowly twirling them around his chopsticks and bringing them to his mouth, splattering a little sauce on his face. Yugao chuckled as she sat up on her bed, wiping herself with a cloth. Kurenai frowned at how close they were. I was saving it for later. She crumbled, making the girls giggle as she pouted. But yeah, I know, Sasuke's going to be a real pain. Plus I have to help Kurenai and Enko prepare for the Jonin exams. Yugao raised an eyebrow that the woman in the chair didn't see. Yugao, of course, seeing it was right, sat down on Naruto's bed with him, legs crossed and the box of noodles between them. You don't have to do it, Naruto. Kurenai fired back, making Naruto raise an eyebrow. More or less, yes, I said I would. Everyone knows it's difficult for an Uchiha to break their word. He spoke, raising his hand as if he were making an oath. No, Naruto-sama, I think it's just you. The rest of your clan, no offense intended, of course, was quite suspicious. He pointed at him with his chopsticks for emphasis. Maybe. What's in the bag, Nico? She sighed as she turned around and looked for it. I picked up some Pocky. I know it's supposed to be something for after the mission, but it seemed like the right thing to do, now that you're recovered and all. Naruto nodded. He seemed to agree with the idea, while Kurenai looked confused. Do you like Pocky, Naruto? You didn't know, Kurenai-san? Yugao exclaimed, surprised. Naruto-sama loves Pocky. I still remember when he and Weasel went to a convention about it, claiming it was a vital mission for the village's safety. Naruto smiled sadly, recalling the day he and Itachi began to bond. It was that day he had taken the Uchiha. That's true, but without my Pocky it's hard for me to do my best. Kurenai and Yugao's minds were filled with slightly more mischievous thoughts. I'll have to remember that, Naruto-sama, purred the purple creature, further confusing Naruto. A knock on the door interrupted the group's conversation as a doctor entered carrying a clipboard. Naruto-sama, you're cleared to leave. You'll return to active duty in 2 weeks to allow your body time to recover. In the meantime, take your training easy. I don't want to see you back here so soon. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck shyly. As the doctor left, his expression changed, becoming serious. Kurenai, I'll speak with Hokage-sama tomorrow. When Enko returns, you two will go through a training camp. Naruto style. Yugao paled and gently patted Kurenai on the shoulder. Good luck, you'll need it. Kurenai stiffened at the Umbu's touch. Why did they always smell of war? Naruto was getting dressed, a stick of Pocky dangling from his mouth. He was glad someone had washed her. Kurenai had gone back home, saying she'd see him soon, while Yugao waited in a corner for him to finish dressing. It was Oni who showed up tonight, wasn't it? She asked Naruto as he put on his jeans, zipped them up, and buttoned them, slipping his white shirt over them while fiddling with the buttons. Yugao sighed and moved forward, starting to play with the buttons herself as she slowly fastened them. Naruto rolled up his sleeves to make them more comfortable. Yes, that was the previous Oni. She frowned. Her sleeves were already in place, but Yugao had only buttoned 2 buttons. She patted her head, not noticing the slight blush on her cheeks. What did he want? She asked, walking away from him. When she looked at him, he turned his head and looked toward the other side of town. He just wants to have fun. Umbu years. Her feet landed silently, a black suit covering her body, concealing her identity from anyone who might search for her. She reached behind her back. A seal on her right shoulder flashed white for an instant, drawing her back to the front, forming her bow. A quiver burned slowly on his back. With deft movements, he raised his hand, drew an arrow, and placed it on his bow. His expert eye remained fixed on the target. Pulling back the string, he ensured the shot was accurate. His fingers slowly released the string, watching as the arrow flew true, silent, through the glass and through his target's skull, pinning him to the wall. 28. He vanished from where he stood, reappearing in a tree moments later. He retreated into the shadows to remain hidden as he prepared to shoot, his chakra keeping him anchored to the tree. 2 guards. Drawing another arrow from his quiver, he saw the 2 guards conversing as they walked by. The bowstring was taut. His fingers slipped again as he watched the arrow fly. This time, Naruto vanished with it, and his arrow pierced one of the guards. His friend glanced over at his partner's position now that all was quiet. He gasped at the sight of the pool of blood forming. He reached for his communicator. He tried to speak, but only a gurgle came out. He clutched his throat. It was wet. He looked around. A boy in a suit emerged from the shadows, toying with a blood-covered kunai. Good night. With a quick flick of his wrist, his hands were free, and a thud echoed as he continued on his way through the night. All guards downstairs. Now I'm working to get in. Understood, Taicho. He frowned. His partner was so young, 10 years old, a girl with purple hair, far too inexperienced for this operation, which is why Naruto had her sit and observe from a distance. He quickly scaled the wall, stopping by a window. With a quick glance, he spotted his targets. He forced the lock and entered, disabling the trap and putting his feet on the floor. There was movement on the bed. As he drew his bow back, it vanished while his hand remained there. A katana formed just as he reached the bed. 2 swift, silent cuts. He watched as the sheets tightened. Lords of the land of corrupted fire, your orders came from the daimyo this time. Had he become a tool of his village? The door to the room where he stood opened slowly, and a child, about 4 years old, entered, crying from a nightmare. Naruto frowned beneath his mask. There was no note about the presence of children. His kanta was sealed as he advanced, not a drop of sweat on his body. He quickly checked if he had a transformation form, and, finding that he didn't, crouched down to the girl's level, letting his helmet fall off. Her red eyes swiveled. A small mole sat below her lips, on the left. Her gray eyes stared at him, allowing him to cast the Jinjutsu. You must go back to bed, little one. When you wake up in the morning, put some food and water in a bag and walk. Keep walking until you find someone you know. Now go to bed, little one. The nightmare will be over soon. The little girl hugged her teddy bear tightly, gave it a small nod, and left the room. Naruto sighed, swiftly severing the heads of his targets and placing them on a scroll. His helmet deployed from his neck, covering his head. He melted back into the shadows as he walked through the corridors, finding his way to the basement. He quickly cut the lock and pushed open the door. Girls of all ages lay piled up, with straw thrown on the floor for bedding, their food and water stored in dishes like animals. Your captors are gone. The guards are dead. You are free. She spoke, disappearing and letting them go. A pair of green eyes burned that image into her mind. She would not forget that outfit. Naruto dropped down against a tree and made the necessary movement to free his companion. She took a shaky step forward. Her purple hair shimmered in the moonlight. Taicho. She bowed. Naruto stood upright, a foot taller than the girl, and patted her on the head. Come on, Nico. The mission is over. Let's go home. A chilling creak echoed through the small office, followed by the sound of blood dripping onto the floor. 2 blondes stared in astonishment at the bored, dark-haired man. A bone protruded from his arm. Why did you do that? Naruto glanced indifferently at the blonde Senju, a question on his face. You said we wasted your time? So I gave you something to heal you. He pointed to his arm, and Minato glanced at it for a moment, giving his son an almost sickening look. Is that muscle? Tsunade sighed as she looked at Naruto's arm, swallowing her breakfast which was threatening to rise again. Ah, yes, yes. Doesn't it hurt, Naruto? He looked at his arm, then at Tsunade, and finally fixed his gaze on him. More or less. Then, I guess I technically still need healing. He raised an eyebrow at Tsunade, who simply threw up her hands and shook her head. Kid, I know you can heal that yourself. Naruto shrugged and retrieved his arm, using his right hand to heal it. Now that I've been back for a while, are you going to reconsider the medical academy? His arms were crossed under his chest, and his feet were shoulder-width apart. This was a stance Naruto was familiar with. They'd only used it twice, but on both occasions Yugao got a free trip to the hot springs. Come to think of it, it seemed like a powerful jutsu. Naruto, what are you doing? Both blondes looked at the only person in the room, who was now imitating Tsunade's posture, or at least trying to. I haven't been able to defeat this jutsu. They say the best way to counter it is by learning it. He nodded, agreeing with himself, while the busted blonde watched him for a moment, slowly turning to face Minato. And Naruto, that's not a jutsu. It's more like your predatory gaze. Naruto realized this as he quickly shifted his stance and stared intently at the blonde Sannin. His head twitched at the chill he'd just felt in the room. Sweat began to trickle down his forehead as Naruto stood there, head propped on his knuckles, looking bored. What is this? The Sannin stammered as Naruto raised an eyebrow. A mixture of ki, the Ninetales chakra, and primitive facial muscles that were lost over time. Naruto explained wearily. It allows me to appear so superior to you that any conflict would bore me, hence the bored expression. This is what I use to keep those pesky ANBU at bay. It always works. The tension in the room dissipated, and Naruto yawned. Hey, do you need me for anything, or can I go to the hot springs? Just go. Naruto, I'll see you later. Hot springs. Count me in. Minato had a strange expression on his face, as his son and Tsunade slowly walked away from him without a care in the world. I heard Jiraiya is still out of town, so you shouldn't worry about people trying to get a glimpse. Sounds good. I could use some relaxation. It's been a while since we last saw each other, hasn't it, Naruto? The man in question shrugged as they walked. A few years ago, you called me right after the Uchiha incident. You had a very nasty little problem there. It almost makes me want to check my gray hairs just thinking about it. Tsunade covered her mouth with one hand as she laughed. You were alone at that moment. What happened to your partner? Naruto froze for a moment. The air around him grew cold. Tsunade struggled desperately to breathe. The crowd around them seemed to stop, torn between gazing at the sight of Madara and Hashirama's grandchildren or fleeing for their own safety. Uchiha Itachi was my partner. I rejoined Nico after that year ended. He watched her frown closely. I'm sorry, but I don't like to talk about what happened in public. He grasped the hidden meaning of her words. The Uchiha massacre wasn't what it seemed. Well, here we are. This is the best part of Konoha, at least for me. The Senju woman pointed to the entrance. Naruto followed her and paid for both of them. They walked down separate corridors and changed clothes to enter the hot springs. I'm telling you, Kurenai, this is the best way to relax on a day off. I have no doubt that this is what Naruto was planning for us when he gave it to us. Two beautiful women entered through the doors, paid, and went into the changing rooms. Naruto sat comfortably. He let out a soft sigh as he felt the steaming water brush against his skin. As he sat down, the water bubbled and boiled, and the steam rose even higher, obscuring him from view. Yugao was right, they're relaxing. He scratched his back against the stones of the wall, enjoying the warmth. He removed the towel from around his neck and placed it over his eyes, slowly submerging himself in the water, gradually disconnecting from the world. Fine, even if he is an Uchiha. Tsunade leaned back, resting an arm across her breasts. She'd heard the rumor that if they were big enough they floated, and she wasn't about to test it, especially not in a public spring. An eyebrow rose at the sound of voices entering the area. One of them noticed her instantly. Kid. She nodded to the purple-haired girl, who froze. Ah, hello, Tsunade-sama. The nervous Anko scratched her head shyly as she entered the relaxing waters. This is my friend Kurenai. The dark-haired beauty greeted the Senju timidly. Don't be shy, girls, we're all naked here. Senju let out a long sigh as she covered her eyes with a towel. Although even I know Kurenai has a killer figure. She pointed lazily in their direction, causing the woman in question to gasp. The blonde responded with a laugh. annoying another customer. Tsunade, it's not wise to have fun at the expense of others. Perhaps that's why you have such bad luck. Mama Naruto, it's a day to relax. Just go back to what you were doing. I was just remembering that time you got the Hokage to bail you out of jail. I never thought a Senju would be so happy to see an Uchiha. He heard her giggle and crumpled the towel away from his face, only to see a relatively pink duo sitting in the water. So I guess you both know Naruto? He nodded slowly in response. How do you know him? Anko raised her hand, indicating she would answer. I'm like her little sister. Kurenai, here is a possible future love. A hand covered Anko's mouth as the girl they had just been talking about tried to pretend to be a tomato. You'll have to forgive her, Tsunade-sama. It seems she drank too much this morning. Anko bit the hand covering her mouth, causing Kurenai to gasp. Well, little Kurenai likes Naruto, huh? Anko nodded proudly as Kurenai let out a small eep and covered her face. Hey, Naruto. She no longer covered her face. Now she looked embarrassedly at the Senju in the bathroom. Yes, Tsunade. Her voice, always calm, came through the wall. I ran into a girl this morning. I think her name was Kyurine. He held up his fingers for silence, signaling the girls to be quiet. Do you mean Kurenai? Perhaps you could describe her to me. I was thinking of hiring her as an apprentice. She has a curvaceous figure, almost like a dancer's, black hair that reaches her waist, and ruby-red eyes. Perhaps that idea will have to wait. I'm training her for the Jounin exams. Tsunade raised an eyebrow as she watched the Genjutsu user slowly sink into the water. Yes, it's her. Did you see how they're looking at her? Naruto smiled, the towel still covering his eyes. Yes, I got into a fight because of her about 2 months ago. I think I still owe her a drink. Kurenai frowned as she said those words, and Tsunade just chuckled. So, where is she staying so I can talk to her about some training? Right now her house is under repair, or so Anko says. Are you referring to that 2-bedroom house in 44? Yes, what's wrong with my house? Confusion was evident in her voice. It's just that, on my way back to the village, I was talking to Anko. She told me that Irika usually spends the night at her house. So where does Kurenai sleep? The mocking smile on his lips deepened. I try to give her as much space as possible, but she usually insists on sleeping in my bed with her. Tsunade raised an eyebrow at the sight of the woman in question, who blushed even more. Her attention was quickly drawn to a surge of chakra on the other side of the wall. Excuse the interruption, but the Hokage has summoned me. I'll see you later. Also, remember I have sensory abilities, girls. Tsunade laughed again as Naruto left, quickly donning his armor and making his way through the village. She knew all along, didn't she, Tsunade-sama? Asked the purple woman in the bathroom. Tsunade now had an incredibly innocent look. Nico dropped down next to Naruto as he entered the tower, quickly dusting herself off and clearing her throat. Yes, Nico. I just wanted to make sure you were all right, Naruto-sama. He smiled gently. I'm fine, Nico. You should resume your duties. Otherwise, Hokage-sama might have to punish you. He shook his head vigorously. I've been tasked with following you and recording the methods you use to train Jonin. I'm currently fulfilling my duty. Naruto raised an eyebrow and shrugged slightly. All right, but put on civilian clothes. I don't want people to get the wrong idea. If I'm escorted by the Umbu all the time, I might scare them off, you know. Yugao nodded and disappeared. Naruto just sighed softly and continued down the corridors, quickly reaching the top. The Umbu bowed to him as he entered his father's office. Sometimes I wonder who they would listen to if the time came. Minato mused aloud, making the shadows, now hidden again, tremble. I taught them to listen to you. I mean, if the commander isn't present, seeing how they continue to act like this, am I supposed to assume that place is still empty? Minato nodded, took out a file, and handed it to Naruto. He glanced at it quickly before looking back at his father. When I open this, I won't find what I did last time, will I? He opened the file without waiting for an answer, frowning as he read it. I can't, not now that people know who I was. It goes against the Yanbu code. Minato stood up from behind his desk, pulled out a second file, and slammed it down. Clan chiefs cannot be members of ANBU. They must choose one or the other. In both positions, they will help the village in ways only they can. If I decline both, Minato froze and looked at his son. Sasuke is next in line to succeed him as Chief Uchiha. Now I'm exposed. People will start to find out who I was in A and BU. That means I'm ineligible for either position. Besides, both are optional. The facts were laid bare before the blonde Kage. So you'll be facing a Genin team? The room grew a little colder as Naruto looked at his father. Is this what you were pushing for? Naruto's hands pressed down on the edge of Minato's desk as they glared at each other. I'm not good with children. I produce people who will kill without a second thought. Do you want me to turn your daughter into the same monster as me? His black brows twitched with anger. This suggestion was absurd. Naruto, the village made you what you are. I'm trying to make you my son again. Naruto stood up and walked away from his father, pausing his hand on the doorknob to leave. With all due respect, Hokage-sama, I must decline those positions. None of them suit me. I'll leave training if you need me. The door opened, and Naruto stepped outside. Naruto. He paused and turned his head to the side. His golden eyes met his father's blue ones. You still have to decide Kushina's punishment. Naruto looked back at the door and frowned. It was hidden from the others. I already did it. When we both have free time, we'll meet. Is there anything else? Hearing nothing from her father, she left the room and closed the door. Kurenai had enjoyed the rest of her time at the hot springs. She relaxed and pushed away all the thoughts that had been nagging at her. Hey, Kure-chan, shall we go home? And then they all ran back. What bothered her most was that Naruto knew they were there. How could they have forgotten that he could always tell where they were without looking? I'll be out soon, Anko. The purple-haired girl shrugged as she skipped towards the changing rooms, leaving Tsunade and Kurenai at the springs. Naruto, he most likely doesn't know, and he never will know, how you feel about him, not until you confess. You must remember that he was kept away from the rest of your family. He doesn't understand relationships. The Senju spoke softly as she walked past Kurenai and left, leaving her lost in thought for a few moments, before the crimson-eyed woman left and headed for the rooms. She changed quickly and headed back to Training Camp 44. They arrived at the house quickly, opened the door, and found it empty again, just as it had been the past few days. Kurenai went to the bench and found a note about a book for her. Kurenai, I saw you were interested in this and some others. I've left the others in bed for you. I don't know how long I'll be gone. Train hard until I get back, okay? It was short, but it still made her feel a little better that he hadn't forgotten her training. She heard screams and found Anko petrified, pinned against the wall by Kanai, one of which landed next to her head with a note. Anko, you need to work on improving your infiltration methods. That's why I installed a trap at your end of the house. It will change every day. Train hard and enjoy. That sadistic bastard. Anko turned her head and saw the book in her friend's hand. He lent you bad blood, huh? It's a good book, though his family was a bit strange, which makes you wonder what would have become of him if they'd still been alive, you know. Anko took the book from her for a moment, flipping through a few pages, and finally found the one she was looking for. He always told me not to try this without asking him first. I suppose you'd get the same rule, though it's very interesting. Kurenai knew this page well. It was a parting gift. In return, I was able to reread this book. His words echoed in his mind. Level 3 Manipulation. As he skimmed the text, he found something that caught his attention. Golden Eyes of the Thunder God, a byproduct of achieving Level 3 in Lightning Manipulation. To reach this stage, like the others, you must merge with the element. Each demands you go to life-threatening extremes. Lightning is no exception. You must merge with the storm and draw its power into your body. Golden Eyes of the Thunder God. It's still unknown what they are capable of, or if it's just a change in appearance. Rumor has it that eyesight is enhanced during a storm, but unfortunately, nothing can be proven. He put the book down for a moment. Naruto has golden eyes. Was it a coincidence, or was she following what the book said? The Uchiha are supposed to have an affinity for fire, she mused, flipping through the pages, pausing on the one with the embroidered red border. Her fingers traced the edge, feeling the heat emanating from it. Dragon's Stomach, a byproduct of achieving the legendary level 3 in fire manipulation. Simply put, your body adapts better to the flames, which now become a source of power, sustenance, and pleasure. She blushed slightly at the thought. It seems your clan is a bunch of zealots. A chuckle escaped her lips. Ingesting fire is the only way to initiate the mutation. It forces your body to adapt to the levels necessary to perform the highest level Katan Jutsu. Sign below so we can monitor the probability of the Uchiha reaching this stage. Uchiha Madara, Uchiha Azuna, Uchiha Izanami, Uchiha Naruto. The names. She'd heard that Azuna was Madara's brother and Naruto his grandson. But where did Izanami fit into all of this? Izanami. She heard shuffling footsteps from Anko's room as the purple-haired girl came out, scratching the back of her neck. Uchiha Izanami. Kurenai looked up questioningly and nodded slowly. That's Naruto's mother's name. She's quite sensitive about that subject, so be careful with that name. You should put that book down for now. Reading it for long periods isn't good for us. Without the Sharingan, we only get half the information, which means we start thinking with only half the information. Anko sighed as she stretched, looking over Kurenai's shoulder. She placed a finger on the top of the page, where a small amount of chakra was flowing, and arranged the words. Look, you only get half the information. This helps to give a little more. Naruto says there are about 5 or 6 pages of content on each page, layered with Genjutsu and Fuinjutsu. His grandfather was a genius, a madman, but a genius. He chimed in as he headed back to the kitchen. Kurenai checked the now modified page and saw a list of jutsu, ways to improve control, and even change the flight path once it had left the mouth. Naruto-sama, do you always have to hide on this day? He paused, the onyx tiles beneath him cooling his feet. He slowly turned to face his companion. Yugao, you know I don't like the idea. Besides, being here lets me browse through my grandfather's and mother's books. He took a step toward her, getting within inches of her as she closed her eyes. Here, you could still review some Kenjutsu while I read. A book fell into her hands. Glancing to her left, she saw it had been moved from right next to her head. Hello, Naruto-sama. Naruto wore a black robe with bright red trim on the cuffs, and the Uchiha fan strapped to his back. His steps were silent, a testament to his years of training, as he wandered through the library, searching for something to focus on. The book he held contained advanced Kenjutsu katas. Unfortunately, he had no desire to train. Looking at his idol and former teammate, he seemed content to wallow in his melancholy. Naruto pulled out a leather-bound book, fiddled with its spine, and lazily surveyed the room, squinting at the slightest disturbance. Tai-Long, for today, could you please leave me alone? I'm not in the mood to argue with you. The sound of padded paws tapping the floor beside him made Naruto frown. I'm just here to keep you company, just like Ida. She closed her eyes and sighed. You're right, Kit. Minato sighed as he entered his house, shuffling through the dimly lit hallways. There was much more light ahead. He knew he was heading for the kitchen, but it was an unexpected sight. Little Natsumi was busy behind the marble countertop. The oven was on and baking. Natsumi-chan, I told you to leave him alone tonight. The blonde girl stood up and glared at her father. It's not right. He should be treated like everyone else. With a pout, she crossed her arms. Minato walked toward her, making her stiffen, and placed a gentle hand on her head. I've made mistakes, I won't deny it, but Naruto insists on spending tonight alone. Besides, I don't even know where he is. Minato stepped back, taking his hand away from his head and returning to the hallway. Daughter, this isn't right. You shouldn't be alone on your birthday. Minato froze and turned his head to look at his daughter. How did you know? I looked at your calendar. All the important dates are there. She was proud of having discovered it and turned to take the contents out of the oven. Well, I made a cake. Kasen didn't help me, so I don't know how good it is, but I tried my best. I just want him to know that he doesn't have to be alone anymore. A small smile appeared on the father's face as he closed his eyes and thought about the present. If you try the old Uchiha mansion, you might get lucky. He hides there sometimes. I didn't tell you, okay? He didn't even need to look to know Natsumi was smiling at him. But don't ask him too many questions if you run into him. Minato left the room. It must be hard for his son to share the day of your birth with the end of your clan. Yugao wandered around the house. Naruto had locked himself in the study, leaving her on the other side of the keyhole. Now she had nothing to do. Dragging her feet along the sleepers, her arms pressed tightly behind her back, she made her way to the front door and heard the sound of someone knocking on it. She opened the enormous, cathedral-like doors and gasped. Natsumi-chan, what are those two doing with you? She suppressed the urge to frown. I wanted to see Naruto and and I found these two sitting at a bar, so I asked them if they wanted to come over. She tilted her head tenderly. Yugao, suppressing the urge to run to her and hug her, leaned against the large doors. You can come in, though I doubt he'll see you. He locked everyone out of the studio an hour ago. Yugao gestured to Natsumi to enter, closing the door behind her. Nico-chan, do you really dislike them that much? Yugao seemed as innocent as ever. Call me Yugao-chan. Don't use my Umbu name when I'm not wearing a mask. Besides, I have no idea what you're talking about. With her feet pointing at the ground, Natsumi groaned as she tried to open the doors. After putting the cake on the floor, she put all her weight into opening it, heavy. Natsumi-chan, do you really need to come in? After receiving the necessary nod from the blonde, Yugao stepped forward and ran her hands over the handles, infusing them with chakra, which opened the doors again. Come in, you can thank Natsumi-chan. The blonde scratched the back of her neck and flashed a wide smile, bending down to pick up the cake. She didn't notice the glares the other girls were giving her. Take your pettiness elsewhere. I'm not in the mood to put up with it. Much less will I let you bother Naruto with your problems. I couldn't have said it better myself, Leo. I suppose your clan has taken an interest as well, hasn't it? Two felines emerged from the shadows, standing proudly before the humans. Tai Long, of the tigers, and Leo, the jet-black one, of the lions. The gleam of his red eyes bathed the corridors in an unsettling reddish hue. The clans have begun to stir. The Aviali clan has left him in ruins, claiming he would only tarnish their already precarious name. It seems almost no one wants to place their faith in an Uchiha. The great lion glanced at the room's occupants. It was all he needed, deeming them unworthy. He's isolated himself, hasn't he? Tai Long nodded slightly to the lion as he advanced. Come, we have much to discuss. Besides, ninjas, if you stand in my way, I'll crush you. The two felines walked down the corridors, leaving the group of girls stunned. That was Leo, the lion's summoning master, leader of the felines. He clenched his hands in a series of jutsu and slammed them against the ground, raising a small cloud of smoke. Mrs. Yugao, how can I help you? An elegant voice cut through the slowly dissipating smoke, revealing a dark blue domestic cat. Sasha-chan, do you know why Leo's here? The cat raised an eyebrow as it sniffed the air. Cats have a pretty good sense of smell, not quite as good as dogs, but it was enough that someone had passed by in the last few hours. Leo-sama is looking for the first summoner of the Felidos. We managed to snatch Uchiha Naruto away from the other clans during the poker night. So to put an end to the arguments among the Felidos, Leo-sama decided to test Uchiha Naruto's worth. Sasha had her right paw raised as she spoke, her eyes closed and a slight smile on her face. The girls were about to advance, but Sasha appeared in front of them, blocking the stairs. Bad idea. Leo-sama will come down with his answer, so? She was interrupted when the house began to shake. Yugao, Anko, and Kurenai anchored themselves to the ground with chakra, but Natsumi, sadly, couldn't. It wasn't long before she felt the heat emanating from the staircase. Moments later, a great torrent of flames engulfed the house, engulfing a black figure that moved slowly forward. I like him, little Sasha, Tai Long. Soon you two will be bowing down to him. Get used to seeing his feet. The black lion snorted as he passed, disappearing in black flames. The flames from the stairs licked at Tai Long's hair as he marked where they would stop. If you really care, don't go up those steps. She's not in her right mind right now. Before she could finish the sentence, they had already left them behind. She didn't even blink, because she already knew how the ninjin would react. They were predictable. The group froze, astonished by what they saw. It wasn't like this when I left. Beams of light shot up toward the ceiling. Their feet were covered in soot as red eyes watched them out of the corner of their eyes. Go away. His voice echoed through the corridors, nearly knocking them down. The air was dry and made breathing difficult. A hand covered in lightning burst through the door, shattering it, and sending splinters flying forward, which reduced to ash before reaching the group in front of him. His eyes shone red, now joyful, wearing samurai-style pants, bandages covering the lower half of his torso, His hair had turned into flames that moved on their own while lightning flashed across his naked, toned body. Please leave. He sounded almost desperate, but it didn't last long, as soft footsteps reached his ears. That form isn't ugly, Naruto. Let your elements flow freely for all to see. Be proud of having the three most offensive elemental affinity types. Tai's calm voice echoed through the halls. It shows what I was created for. I leave ashes and soot in my wake, while the gods themselves try to bring me down. Is this how a human should feel? That they are just a weapon to point at the enemy. He clenched his fists and the lightning increased its effect, tearing the ground apart. In Naruto-kun, Kurenai also stepped forward, feeling the heat of the flames against her outstretched arm, the lightning pricking her skin. You're not a monster. You're Naruto, our friend, brother, and mentor. Natsumi stepped forward, showing the cake to her older brother. It was a Western recipe she'd found buried. Was it called mud cake? The name seemed strange to her, but when she mixed everything together, she understood where it came from. Naruto and I don't want you to be a stranger anymore. I want you to be the older brother you were meant to be, to help me become a ninja, and to talk to me when I'm lonely. I want you to be my Oni-san. With a radiant smile, he trudged through the heat. Naruto's expression softened as he walked. He stopped when the others joined him. Heh, we need you back, Oni-chan. The village is so boring without you. Besides, who's going to teach me how to be a super badass jounin if not you? His pointy little sister spoke, making his eyes weaken. Her long purple hair fluttered behind her as she stopped. Without you, Naruto-sama, who will keep the recruits in line when they make mistakes? Better yet, who will stop all the bar fights with just a look? Try as she might, the words she wanted to say wouldn't come out. Her posture relaxed, her shoulders rounding forward as she took a light step. Her lips, warm to his touch, pressed against his. A hand cupped his cheek. The heat slowly faded, and he opened his eyes, meeting the crimson gaze. I want to get to know you better, Naruto-kun. I know you're a good person. You just need to start showing us the person you want to be seen. She offered him a genuine smile as the flames returned to her black hair. The lightning no longer burned her skin. Her heavy hand rose nervously and encircled her agile figure. Thank you, Kurenai. Thank you all. I won't let you down. Glancing at the girls, she noticed the cake in Natsumi's hands. Natsumi, is that a mud cake? The blonde's eyes widened at recognizing it so quickly. Don't be surprised, Natsumi-chan. Naruto-sama carried out several missions in the West and became famous there. That's where he acquired his taste for sweets, right, Ripper Jack? He raised his eyebrows. It wasn't one of his best works. Do you mean Jack the Ripper? Asked the man in the trench coat. Hey, that was me. My boss was a real pain, but a job's a job. It would be a disgrace to the town if I didn't do it. He lowered his head slightly and felt his arms tighten, as if something were pressing on his chest. How did we go from talking about cake to working? He could feel the vibrations her words sent through his chest. It was strange. She was so close now, but he didn't feel the need to suppress it. Ninjans, all you do is work. Naruto let a smile spread across his lips. Let's forget about this. There's cake. That was the commander she knew and adored. Happy birthday, Naruto and I. The raven-haired man looked at her with a raised eyebrow, while the others gasped, unaware that this day was today. Well, I guess so. Thank you, Natsumi. She closed her eyes and smiled broadly. The blonde, excited, took a candle from one of the many candlesticks on the wall. It was a surprise that they hadn't been damaged. She held it over the cake and smiled at her older brother when he looked at her, confused. You were supposed to blow it out and make a wish, idiot. The fact that he had to tell her what it was made the others frown. Kurenai pulled away from his arms and stepped aside as Naruto walked forward and blew out the candle. I wish to be seen as a human being. The days passed quickly for the group. Naruto had been overseeing Anko and Kurenai's training, while also giving Sasuke smaller exercises to help him develop into a better person. That didn't matter anymore. He was in the middle of a large room, standing behind a bench, and not far to his left was Kushina, in the same position as him. I suppose you've already made a decision, Naruto-san? Hyuga Hayashi, leader of the Hyuga clan, was a real pain when you didn't like him. Unfortunately for most of those present, Naruto had been his personal guard for a while. Inazuka Tsum, primitive, was the only way Naruto could describe her. She had a tendency to act on her most basic instincts, something that also got her into a lot of trouble. Shinobi needed to keep a clear head at all times. Nara Shikaku, lazy genius. That was all that needed to be said about him. His friends, Yamanaka Inoichi, the IT chief, an incredibly shrewd man when necessary, and Akimichi Choza, the human tank, each had an air of Natsume's caliber. He was interested to see what the new generation of Inoshikacho would be capable of. The Uzumaki clan leader was by his side. She needed no explanation, nor did the Senju leader, a certain Senju Tsunade. Sarutobi Asuma trembled in his seat, observing the powerful figures present. He felt out of place. Most would think he was too young to assume command. It was ironic that they thought so while trying to pressure Naruto into taking the coveted Uchiha position. The Aburame clan, led by Shibi, had met Naruto a couple of times. They felt like equals, neither admiring nor enmity towards one another. His father held two positions. He was head of the Namikaze clan and Hokage. His vote counted twice. Civilians were excluded from the meeting. It would be too problematic to involve them if a certain clan head were questioned. The elders, Mitokado Hamura, Udatane Koharu, and Shimura Danzo. The first two didn't get along well with the raven-haired Uchiha. Danzo, on the other hand, always seemed to smile when Naruto was around. I have honorable members of the council. I won't ask for anything lengthy. I just want to show you what you did to me by asking me to look at my memories. The council blinked at her response. You can be much tougher, Naruto-san. You understand that, right? He tilted his head to one side. What a pain sometimes, always wanting to go all out. Yes, I know. I could always steal my sister's mother, but I won't. It's a pain I wouldn't wish on her. Besides, my head isn't a pretty place. Yamanaka Inoichi can vouch for that. Naruto gestured to the blonde man, who swallowed hard. It's true, all ANBU must undergo quarterly scans to assess their fitness for service. Eventually, we stopped using this method with the enforcers. Naruto broke them down repeatedly until they became what their name suggests. But, as we can see, they can still move around and live their daily lives outside of the ANBU. I lost several clan members to the asylums due because of those scans, but we never had to resort to an enforcer. The blonde man sat down and nodded. He almost felt sorry for Kushina. He had seen some of the things Naruto had done. Afterward, he went to his breakfast. Minato clasped his hands in front of his face, looking at his wife and son, who remained motionless as they waited. Do you have something to say, Uzumaki Kushina? The redhead took a deep breath and closed her eyes for a moment. She opened them slowly and looked around. I did what I had to do to protect my daughter and my husband. Wouldn't you do the same in my place? The clan leaders frowned, and Tsunade's fingers tightened against the edge of the desk, nearly breaking it. Seeing that none of the clan leaders responded, she lowered her head. You have to stop living in the past, Kushina, or we'll continue this cycle of hatred. Our two clans are now in ruins, and yet you still wish to keep fighting. I see no reason for it. My vision has always been clouded by darkness, so I learned to close my eyes, to listen instead of see. In a way, you made me who I am today. His voice was calm as he moved to stand before her, looking at her father and receiving the necessary nod to continue. This is what you caused. She closed her eyes, pushing the hair away from her left eye, revealing her now pale skin and a black shuriken spinning against a red background. Tsukuyami. A red moon, its light reflecting across the sky, cast an eerie, hazy glow. Looking around, she noticed her body was bound to a cross. Standing before her was Naruto, a katana in hand. He took a step forward, and she struggled to free herself. Excuse me, this is the default setting for this jutsu. It's primarily used for torture. I mainly use it to transfer vast amounts of information in seconds. Shall I let you cut me? She looked at him with narrowed eyes, struggling a little longer. It seemed she would have to let him go. Those restraints wouldn't budge. With a small movement of her wrists, she let herself fall onto his outstretched arm, quickly pulling away in disgust. Naruto frowned. It seemed her hatred ran much deeper than he had thought. Can we end this? I don't want to be any closer to you than necessary. The katana vanished from her hands, and she brushed a strand of hair away from her left eye. Here, I will show you the various events your seal has triggered. For the next 4 days, you will travel with me, entering and exiting each event. You will have time to become accustomed to me." A few moments passed outside, and Naruto took a step back, wiping the wound on his eye. He slowly stood up and let out a sigh. It seemed that was all he needed to do when Kushina collapsed to the ground, trembling. "Now you know what you've done." "Gomen! Gomen! Gomen!" he repeated on the ground. It seemed to have become a kind of mantra, as he was still repeating it minutes later when Naruto and the Kyuubi finished repairing the damage caused by the jutsu. Naruto shook his head, looking at his stepmother. "It wasn't that bad. Besides, you should apologize to them, not me." The council stared at him for a few moments, and he shrugged. "She experienced the pain I felt fighting the seal, along with the memories, seeing their sleeping faces as I struggled not to hurt them." "Kushina, stop, stand up. You're the leader of a clan. Your punishment has already been inflicted. Once you apologize, I'll forgive you, but right now you're being pathetic. Don't set a bad example for Natsumi. Be strong." Naruto stepped forward and lifted her by the back of her kimono, raising her up and gently setting her down, leaving his hands there to catch her if she fell again. "Why yes, Naruto." His words faltered as he tried to catch his breath. The council seemed surprised by how quickly he changed his opinion of the boy in front of them. "She spent 4 days going through some of the things her seal did to me. I had to help her carry things after the second day. It's quite natural that some kind of bond would form. 4 days alone with someone while revisiting their memories, they could understand the connection you felt. Do you need me for anything else, or may I leave?" The council wished her well, headed for the door, and stopped when they heard Kushina's voice. "Naruto, I'm really sorry. I thought it was for the best." He raised an eyebrow and turned to look at her. "Like I said, Kushina, don't apologize to me. It's the others who need it." The door opened and closed in a single motion, and Naruto disappeared with it. Tsunade cleared her throat and looked at the other council members. "You know that if it had been anyone other than Naruto, they would have demanded your head, right?" Kushina nodded at the Senju's words. "Since you know he has more heart than most, it saddens me that people only see him as a weapon." Minato nodded as he observed the council. "He's requested a few months' vacation after the Jounin exams. Does anyone see a problem with this?" Some members stood up. "Won't he take the team with Uchiha Sasuke?" Minato swallowed, while rising in his throat. It was an argument he had had countless times with his son. "He's made it clear. He won't be taking a position on the council or joining any team. He stated that he'll help train any Genin team if he's available." There were a few murmurs in the council before they nodded silently. "We don't see any problem. Have you given any reason?" "He says he wants to finish part of his training in Ironland." "Too slow," Naruto repeated, dodging Kurenai and Anko's blows. With his katana still sheathed, he struck them in the back of their legs, sending them to the ground. His eyes were closed, his weight resting on the blade. "I only move at the speed of a Jounin, and besides, I'm fighting blind. You need to move faster and take the emotion out of your attacks." They both struggled to their feet, swaying slightly. "Hi Naruto-kun/Oni-chan." He frowned at Anko, which made her laugh. "Gaki, I can't wait to hit you again," he muttered, propelling himself backward. He gripped his sheathed sword upside down. "Come on, you only need to land one blow." He gave a small bow, listening to the sound of his feet, leaping swiftly backward and dispelling the Jinjutsu. He frowned at the scent of poison, turning his head toward its source and hearing a hiss. "Using your snakes so soon, Anko? You should have kept them hidden from your opponent until you couldn't afford to use them anymore." With a grace only heard in fairy tales, she struck each snake that emerged from her sleeves on the top of its head, making them hiss and scatter. She stepped back a few inches as the kunai hit the ground where it had been standing. "Kurenai, you should have anticipated the move and prepared a second trap." She heard the sound of metal slicing through the air and smiled. "I stand corrected, though the delay was a bit too long." She drew her sword from its sheath and sliced the kunai aimed at her back, causing the girls to gasp as they were cut in half. The resounding click told them she was back where she belonged and already in her reverse grip. The air around him grew warmer, and he knew it wasn't him. Catan. Camp wall. His flames quickly consumed those directed toward him. He could hear his students' ragged breaths and smiled. You're doing well, keep it up. It wasn't mockery. He was sincere with them. It was something they had learned to distinguish themselves by. Anko took a deep breath and steadied herself, raising a kunai to her chest and lowering it to her side. I've resisted enough. Her exclamation made Naruto bow and gesture to her, saying, let's go. Anko lunged at Kurenai, who was moving behind her, chaining together signals. Naruto sensed the intrusion of the other chakra and quickly purged it, remaining motionless, making her believe he had succeeded. Anko smiled smugly as she closed the distance with Naruto. Her face blurred before her eyes, and she felt a dull ache in the back of her leg, pulling her to the ground. Kurenai tensed as Naruto appeared before her, katana at his side, advancing with his eyes still closed. He stopped less than 2 centimeters from her mouth, and a small blow struck the side of her leg. Too slow, Kurenai. The soft sound of his tongue as he spoke her name sent a shiver down her spine. The mint and chocolate scent lingered on his breath. Belladonna. Everything about him brought back that thought. A quick turn of her feet, and she was back in the center of the clearing. That's enough for today. I have an appointment. Her crimson eyes slowly opened, taking in the nervous expression on the Jinjutsu user's face. Are you all right, Kurenai? Although the concern in her voice was touching, she couldn't find the words to reply, nodding silently. See you later tonight? She stiffened and looked at him nervously. Actually, the repairs are already done. I'm moving back into my house tonight. He raised an eyebrow and looked at her questioningly. That's understandable. I'll be moving too. The Uchiha mansion needs maintenance, and besides, the village is pressuring me to claim it as my own. He grunted. The house in the Forest of Death will become part of the training grounds. Kurenai felt a chill run down her spine. It was a terrifying thought, turning that area into part of the training grounds. I'll see you when I see you then. You'll know where to find me. Tai Long emerged from a strange portal beside Naruto, nodding his head before they both vanished in a cloud of black flames. No matter how many times I see it, it's still amazing. Kurenai could only agree with her purple-haired friend. What are we doing here, Naruto-san? Sasuke asked reasonably, as they both stepped through large metal doors that creaked under their own weight. They were greeted by a group of ANBU, who quickly led them through the main corridors. Sasuke felt his life ebbing away as they walked through the area. I'm getting rid of something that could kill you on the field. The smaller Uchiha raised an eyebrow and looked at Naruto. Naruto didn't even stop, continuing onward. They walked in relative silence, broken only by Sasuke's soft footsteps. This continued for a few minutes before Naruto and the ANBU stopped in front of a large metal door, a square of bars about 1.5 meters across, which offered a view into the room. Naruto turned to the small boy and handed him a kunai. It was a little longer than usual, but still felt familiar in Sasuke's inexperienced hands. Come in. Only one of you can leave. Sasuke raised an eyebrow, but nodded anyway, slowly entering the room once it was open. The door slammed shut behind him, and the clanking of chains filled the air. They say if I kill you, I can be free. His voice dry and his figure weak, Sasuke swallowed, steadying himself and turning the kunai over. I will not become a one-way ticket to freedom. He finally understood. He was in a prison, though he didn't understand why. The man moved forward slowly, revealing his scarred body and the stitches across his eye. Remember, the winner goes free. Naruto shouted from behind the door, opening his golden eyes, which allowed him to see Sasuke's chakra movements. In moments like these, his cursed eyes came in very handy. A small fire burned within Sasuke, making Naruto smirk smugly as he watched the Uchiha roll to the side, the sound of chains hitting the ground echoing in the air. Sasuke panicked. Now he understood what he was supposed to do. When the chain hit the ground, it slammed his foot down, showing him just how weak the man in front of him was. Sasuke wasn't a strapping 12-year-old at all. He was thin, so it almost surprised him that the man couldn't pull the chain out from under his feet. The man in front of him wore the same astonished expression. It was thanks to Naruto's training that he recovered first, rolling on the ground again. During the roll, he slid the man's release shackles around his arm and pulled forward, making him lose his balance. 2 cuts appeared, one on his thigh and the other on his calf muscle. The man staggered forward, letting out a roar of pain, his eyes blazing as his senses were clouded by adrenaline. Sweat trickled down the young Uchiha's face. He wasn't physically exhausted, but this brief struggle showed he wasn't ready for a life-or-death situation. He could feel his heart pounding in his ears, irritation burning in his eyes. He didn't dare look away or try to remedy the situation. His entire focus was on his enemy. That's when it happened. The man's dark brown hair seemed to slow to a snail's pace. He saw the man's arm twist for a killing blow. Sasuke's agile body responded, pushing the arm further, causing the man to overextend. With skillful movements, the kunai lodged in the prisoner's ribs. His tattered clothes were stained red as he fell to his knees. "I trust an Uchiha to fight my dirty tricks," the man exclaimed as his eyes closed, collapsing forward with a loud crunch. Sasuke stood still, the kunai rolling from his hand and clanging against the cold cobblestone floor. He vaguely recognized that the doors had opened and the man had been dragged out of the room. The first kill is the hardest. I'd say unlocking the first level of the Sharingan wasn't exactly planned, but there was a good chance it would happen. Why? Naruto raised an eyebrow at the sight of the now trembling boy and signaled to the Umbu to leave them alone. "You're asking why? Look at you now. Would you be able to fight in your current state?" Sasuke shook his head weakly, still in shock from what had happened moments before. "Remember what I told you earlier," Naruto said, slurring his words, seeing the faint understanding on the boy's face. "I'm getting rid of something that could get you killed in the field," he muttered, looking at his bloody hands. "That's why I did it, I killed. It's not easy to take a life. The best thing is to learn to detach yourself from emotions. I won't lie and say it gets easier, but you still feel guilty every time. But you'll have to learn to live like this. Can you imagine killing again, Sasuke?" The boy looked at Naruto. From his current position, it seemed as if he were speaking to Kami. Naruto seemed so strong and wise. It was refreshing. Moments like this showed Sasuke that, no matter how strong someone seemed, deep down they were still human. "I don't know. Can I have time to think?" Naruto nodded and made the kunai on the ground vanish into a pile of ash, indicating that it was part of his special equipment, along with his bow and sword. "You have until your graduation exams. Can I continue training you if you want?" He received a weak nod in response. "I'd rather train than end up in the hospital because of a fight between civilians." Sasuke chuckled at the end of his sentence and calmed down. His head was still a little lower than before, and Naruto, seeing this, placed a hand on his back and gave him a warm smile. "The fact that you regret what you did shows you're more of a man than most. How about we get you something to eat and I explain the Sharingan to you in more detail?" Naruto's voice had a calming effect on the young Uchiha as he raised his head slightly. "Sounds good. Just wait a moment, please." Naruto raised an eyebrow as Sasuke walked away from him, standing in the corner for a moment before familiarizing himself with his lunch. "I had the same reaction as you after my first murder." A head of black hair rose from a corner, her hands still firmly pressed against the wall. "That makes me feel a little better." "I was 5 years old," Naruto mocked, seeing the frown on Sasuke's face. "It made it all worthwhile." "I take it back." Naruto chuckled as he placed a hand on Sasuke's back and led them back to the Uchiha mansion. They stood amidst the black floors. The stone walls kept the interior cooler than necessary. It was fortunate he had a high affinity for fire to keep his body warm. "Is this it?" Sasuke's question hung in the air as Naruto moved around the room, a white tiger trailing behind him. "Yes, this is the Uchiha mansion, and from tonight on, it's my home too. Let's get you washed up. I don't want you stinking up the restaurant we're going to." A soft knock echoed off the cold walls. Naruto sighed as he headed for the door. "Tailong, can you accompany Sasuke to the bathroom?" He could have sworn the tiger chuckled softly before nodding for him to follow. Unfortunately, he hadn't even reached the top of the stairs when Naruto opened the door. "What is he doing here?" Naruto's face remained impassive as he touched his ear. With a lazy glance at Natsumi, she quickly apologized and began to speak in a lower voice. "Why is Sasuke here?" "You're asking why Uchiha Sasuke is at the Uchiha mansion with me, Uchiha Naruto? Do you see a pattern here, Natsumi-chan?" The blonde tapped her chin with her finger. Suddenly, it clicked. Naruto would have sworn he heard a sound inside his head. "So he's like family, right?" Naruto's head swiveled from side to side. "More or less. I just finished training him today. We were about to go out to dinner. Do you want to come? She checked her clothes and Naruto's, nodding slightly. Well, let's wait for Sasuke then. It's a very important day for him. He saw the confusion on her face and chuckled. You wouldn't understand. Let's just say he finally opened his eyes today. A towel wrapped around her, another drying her hair. Naruto's training had become even more difficult. A slight blush crept across her face as she recalled the time they'd spent together on the lake's surface, the water dripping onto her bare torso, her muscles tensing with every movement. It was quite disconcerting. She chuckled and tossed the towel she'd used to dry her hair into the laundry basket. She put water on the stove to boil and enjoyed a simple meal. Her long, wavy black hair cascaded down her back. Her crimson eyes surveyed the room. She dropped the towel wrapped around her to the floor and quickly put on her pajamas, using the chakra rope exercise Naruto had taught her to fasten one with the other. Her dinner was simple, pork fried rice. A long sigh escaped her lips as she lay down. As her head touched the pillow, she noticed that something wasn't quite right. Looking around, nothing seemed out of place. Again, the lights went out. It was as if that thought had been spoken aloud. A red glow illuminated the room. She slowly turned her head to look at it before everything went dark. A sigh escaped her body as she slowly opened her eyes. She felt a sharp pain in her back. Looking around, she stiffened and found herself lying on a tree branch 9 meters high, in her pajamas. Only when she tensed did she notice the acute pain in her leg. Looking down, she was surprised to see a kunai sticking out of the branch. Focusing chakra on her back for support, she yanked the kunai out, slashing part of her upper body and leaving her abdomen exposed to the forest breeze. Looking around, he couldn't find any familiar landmarks. With a sigh of pain, he rolled onto his stomach and slowly climbed down the tree. He had no idea where he was, or if he was still in danger. It would be best not to waste any more chakra than he needed. Reaching the base of the tree, Kurenai sighed, looked up, and let out a nervous giggle. I guess it's good that I don't move around much while I sleep, she said dryly. A faint rustle of a lip echoed in her footsteps as she tried to find her way through the woods. A low growl startled her. The bushes to her right began to rustle, and soon after, a black wolf emerged and growled at her, baring its fangs and leaping forward, dragging its injured leg. Kurenai dodged the first attack, leaving a deep gash across its side. A great howl erupted from the beast, and suddenly she found herself cornered. Looking around, she had no way to escape. Using Naruto's recent teachings, she crouched down and wove the pack's attacks. While threading a long strip of hanging signs with one hand, the other was busy cutting the wolves when they got too close. The pack began to shrink and whimper, letting her know the jutsu had worked. A simple demonic vision technique. She frowned. It was almost too easy. When she looked back at it, she saw it dissipate into smoke. Damn it, she hissed, limping away into the woods. She was being chased. She felt eyes on the back of her neck, scanning her surroundings. Whoever it was, they could surely hide. She felt a tingle in her neck and, spinning on her feet, swung the kunai downward. Hey, Kurei-chan, that could have hurt someone.